amount as denial, any number of things. So it actually makes it more convoluted until the AI gets a little bit better at listening.
No, but, the Contractors Association uses that. That's how they do their meetings, and that's how they get their minutes, and it's pretty clear. But
Then maybe we should talk about what they're using, because for us it has not been.
okay, we'll bring that up at a different time. Beyond that, I need a motion for the minutes for May 21st, 2024, please.
I move that we accept the minutes from May 21st.
I will second.
Kaylee?
Chair Claren,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gove,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Abstain.
Commissioner Taylor,
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Item 5.2 is the July 16th, 2024 minutes. I need a motion, please.
Motion to approve?
I'll second.
Chair Claren,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gove,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Abstain.
Commissioner Taylor, Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yes.
On to 6.1. Planning Commission application 2021-060 Silver Creek Estates. We're going to first start with a staff presentation. Chantel.
Good evening, Commissioners and Chair Claren. I'm Chantal Bernberg, Associate Planner, and I am here with item 6.1, the continuation of Silver Creek Estates. This is application 2021-60, and it's a development permit. So tonight, the Planning Commission's role is to determine whether or not the project is consistent with our 2025 general plan and our development code, where the state allows us to do so, and to determine whether or not the Commission can approve the incentive, concessions, waivers, and reductions that are requested by the applicant pursuant to state density bonus law. I had highlighted the discussion topics as to really looking at the incentives, concessions, waivers, and reductions, and making sure that they abide by the state density bonus law. So that would be if the incentive and concession results in identifiable and actual cost reduction, if standard application of the development standards that the applicant is requesting to be waived or reduced would physically prevent the project from being built, and then if those incentives, concessions, waivers, or reductions if granted, would cause a public health and safety problem, an environmental problem, harm historical property, or be contrary to state or federal law. So just kind of a reminder, since it's been since May, the project is located in the Winter Creek subdivision on Winter Creek Loop. It's 1.71 acres in size. 2025 general plan has the land use designation as high density residential. The zoning is medium density residential, or ARM 15, and there is a tiny sliver of general commercial. Adjacent land uses include additional RM multifamily zoning for the Winter Creek single-family home lots or small-family home lots, Village Green multifamily zoning, and then we have some commercial to the north and east, and then resource conservation to the northwest. In December 2003, the Planning Commission approved a development permit, plan development, use permit, and tentative map for a 167-unit residential subdivision called Winter Creek. This approval created the subject parcel, which was called Parcel B, and slated it for later development. In the tentative map, the developer was planning on developing it with 20 condo units, but then removed that for the final map. And the Planning Commission adopted a mitigative negative declaration for this site, which included review of the project site. As part of the Winter Creek plan development, the plan development itself had many waivers and reductions of development standards approved by our Planning Commission. The list includes substandard roadways, snow storage, additional site coverage, substandard size of lots, reduced setbacks, et cetera. There was also wetland disturbance and permanent loss of wetlands, but that was addressed through the mitigated negative declaration that was adopted for the subdivision. The project remains at 40 units with the same mix of studio, 1-bedroom, and 2 bedrooms. It's a rental apartment project. 5 of the units are deed restricted to low income affordability, which is 60% AMI. The project now has increased the parking to 76 parking spaces. That's an increase of 4 spaces, with 26 of those in garages. Instead of 10 buildings, we have 9 buildings. 7 are 2-story, and 2 of the buildings have been increased to 3 stories. A quick overview of the current site plan. As you can see, there is a Liberty easement that has been highlighted in the orange rectangle. That's a 50-foot transmission easement. We'll address that in a condition of approval later down in this presentation. And here are some elevations of the new buildings. This is building 1. It would have 12 units, 3 stories, 6 one-bedrooms and 6 two-bedrooms, and it's approximately 8,900 square feet. Building 3 is now also a 3-story building, same square footage, except there is a studio added and where one of the one-bedrooms were on building 1, and that's also 12 units. Building 8 is a 4,500 square foot building with 4 two-bedrooms. And then we move on to our carriage units. The buildings that I just showed have patios and or balconies for each unit. Our carriage units do not. They are either in a 5-car garage design with 2 one-bedroom units up top, or a 4-car garage design with 2 studio units up top. Wanted to highlight the changes since you saw this project in May. As I mentioned, there's an increase of 4 parking spaces. There is an increase of on-site snow storage. For density bonus, there was previously a request for a waiver to provide recreational amenities. With removing a building, there's more room on the site, so there are now 2 picnic areas and a small bocce court. The removal of the building also has increased the usable open space, so no longer needing a waiver for that. However, to do so, the height was increased on those 2 3-story buildings, so 2 of the buildings are 7 feet over our 35-foot maximum, but are 3 stories, so our development code says 3 stories or 35 feet, whichever is less. The 30% open space, there is additional open space, but there's still a reduction of that standard requested. Staff also wanted to highlight some of the kind of fixes to design issues with removing a building. Prior to this change on the site, there were multiple carports and canopies that were required because the buildings were placed very close to pedestrian walkways or parking areas, and there were snow shed issues. Those are no longer needed. And there were some buildings that were really right up against each other with bedroom windows looking at each other, and that has changed. And you can see that in this comparison of the 2 site plans. In our previous May 2024, these arrows are kind of small, but these are where all the carports and canopies were trying to protect the drive aisle and the parking and the walkway. And you can see like building 4 and building 2, building 3 and building 1 were right up next to each other. With the removal of building 8, we've freed up this area and the buildings aren't so close to each other and they're actually able to be moved back off the pedestrian way. So as allowed by state law, the applicant is requesting the following incentive and concession, which is a reduction in private exterior space. As we saw, the carriage units don't have any patios or balconies, and the units that do, they're smaller than what our development code requires. And the applicant is still asking for a waiver for maximum site coverage. The recreational amenity waiver is no longer needed. The required open space is now a reduction of that standard. Parking lot, interior, and perimeter landscaping, there's a reduction in setback. Common usable open space has been met, and now we have an additional waiver for the maximum height standard. And we'll talk more about state density bonus in just a moment. The land use entitlement required to build multifamily housing on this site is a development permit. This is for 11 or more units in the RM15 zone district. The development permit recognizes that the use is allowed by right, but looks more at issues of site layout and site design. And as always, we look to see if a project is consistent with our general plan. We are looking at the 2025 general plan, as this project was deemed complete back in 2021. In the 2025 general plan, the project was, the land use designation was high density residential. This project is providing multifamily rental housing units to ensure that the housing needs of all economic segments of the community are met. It's an infill site located adjacent to an existing residential neighborhood. Residents are within biking and walking distance of many commercial amenities, parks, et cetera. And this site was also previously designated for high density density multifamily housing in this general plan. So staff believes the project is consistent with our 2025 general plan. The project is consistent with some aspects of our development code. First would be base density. Doing the math, the project is allowed to have 24.693 dwelling units. Our development code allows density to be based on the number of bedrooms. And as I had mentioned previously, there's studios and 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, so smaller units, smaller bedroom sizes. And as you can see, that equates to a dwelling unit equivalent. And when you do the math for the 36 base units that were proposed, it comes out to 24.58 dwelling units, which is less than the allowable 24.693. So base density is consistent with the development code. In May and still in August, the project was consistent with the development code snow storage requirements for all of our projects. The snow storage requirements is that 50% of your total parking and driveway area is how you calculate how much snow storage you need. You need half of that number to be stored on site. So for the change, the numbers have changed slightly. There's approximately 14,000 square feet of total snow storage required, which means approximately 7,000 must be stored on site, and the project is proposing to store 10,570. So that does meet our development code standards. There will be a condition of approval that requires an approved off-haul plan that will be reviewed by engineering. So with that, the snow storage would be consistent with our development code. Here are some other standards that the development are consistent with. Setbacks. Now they are consistent with the common recreational amenity requirement for multifamily housing. There's laundry facility requirement they are consistent with, and then the common open space requirement. Town of Truckee has an inclusionary housing ordinance, which requires that 15% of all new dwelling units are required to be affordable units. When doing the math from the base density, we have 36 unit project, which would come out to 5.4 units. The code allows you to pay an in lieu fee for a fractional amount. So 5 units are proposed to be deed restricted, and then 40% of the in lieu fee at the time of permit issuance would be required to be paid. There are also 2 conditions of approval that staff believes should be at least highlighted. I spoke about the Liberty easement. That is a 50-foot high transmission line easement that encumbers the property. Liberty was in talks with the applicant and the town about permissions for parking and other improvements in that easement back in 2022, 2021. Some of the improvements have changed since that time. There's a rockery wall, landscaping, parking has moved around. And Liberty has not been responsive to town's project routings since that time and the routings that we've had this year. So the condition of approval is that Liberty must provide approval prior to the town issuing a permit that would allow disturbance or improvements put in their easement. Also, condition of approval number 28. Since the May meeting, the Winter Creek HOA provided additional documentation showing that the Winter Creek roads are not public with private maintenance, but are actually fully private roadways. Staff believes it's very likely that Winter Creek has full access to this. The parcel was created as part of the subdivision. It would be landlocked, but to ensure that they do have legal access before we allow for a permit to be issued, the applicant would be required to demonstrate they have legal access and to address maintenance of whatever portion is their legal access. And this has been discussed with our town attorney and engineering. So a quick overview on state density bonus law, just to remind everyone where we're at with that. The state has passed hundreds of bills since 2018 trying to solve our housing crisis, really by removing local control and any impediment to building housing regarding if it's affordable or not. Local jurisdictions must follow state law. That's just kind of a given. I think the project level here is not whether or not we want or the town is going to follow state law. It's, how do we follow the laws that the state have put forth. So jurisdictions are required to grant a density bonus if a project qualifies. The project is providing 13.8% affordability, which qualifies the project under the state density bonus law. So once it qualifies, we look to see how much additional density they qualify for. And because they have at least 13%, they use a sliding scale. You would go over low income. That gives them 24.5% above the base density. With 36 units, add that 24.5%. They're allowed 9 additional units. So the maximum density under state density bonus law would be 45 units on this site. The project is proposing 40. And with state density bonus law, the town's required to provide a number of incentives or concessions. These are based on how the affordability given by the project. The project qualifies for one. And the difference between the concession and incentive is that this has to show that it's actually reducing costs. So it's an identifiable and actual cost reduction. The applicant is requesting the reduction of private exterior space, so not having to build patios or balconies or not building them that large as part of that financial cost reduction. Then the state density bonus law allows an unlimited amount of waivers or reductions of development standards that could preclude the developer from building at the requested density. The town cannot ask the developer to prove that it wouldn't work with these regulations. It doesn't count as an incentive and concession. As I said, there are no limits. However, the town is not required to grant anything that is contrary to law or could pose a public health and safety risk. I've listed again, we've gone over them, but those are the waivers and reductions that are currently being currently being requested. The state also specifies maximum parking requirements by this table, and using that table, the town cannot require any more than 48 parking spaces. The project is currently providing 76. As I mentioned, the town is not required to waive or reduce something that's contrary to law or public health and safety. So this is an example of some of the requirements that the town would not approve. That would be a reduction in snow storage, not treating stormwater, setbacks, solid waste requirements, and any requirements for the fire district. So diving in a little bit more on the incentives and concessions, I mentioned private exterior space. This is our development code section that requires the balcony, deck, or patio and the sizing of such. The applicant is requesting to reduce that provision to have cost reduction for affordable housing rents. Our development code speaks to the commission being required to grant this concession unless it can make one or more of the following findings, and that has to be based on substantial evidence that the commission would need to have, that the onus is on the commission or on the town, not vice versa. So really looking at if it's identifiable cost reduction, if it's has a specific adverse impact, if it would impact a historical resource, or if it's contrary to state or federal law. And as I mentioned, the Schreiber versus City of Los Angeles appellate court ruling is what determined that a jurisdiction cannot require an applicant to submit like a pro forma or any other documentation to prove that this cost reduction is identifiable. The waivers and reductions to development standards are similar. The commission is required to approve it unless they can make one of these findings. The difference here is that the waiver reduction has the effect of physically precluding the construction at the density requested. And once again, these are the current waivers and reductions being requested. These are the ones that are physically precluding development at the higher density. Going over the parking, as I mentioned, the project is providing 76 spaces, 26 in garages. The state does not allow us to require covered parking or more than 48. However, had this been a non-state density bonus project, just to kind of give you an idea of what we would be looking at, the development code would be requiring 85 parking spaces, with 35 of those spaces located in a garage. So is the project consistent with our development code? It's not. Is the project consistent with state density bonus law? It is. So with the state density bonus law, the project is allowed to deviate from our development code. And the CEQA exemption, staff is supporting an infill exemption. It's the Class 32 exemption. This is because it's a housing project with a less than 5 acres, on a site less than 5 acres. It is urban use. It is consistent with the general plan designation, policies, and applicable zoning designation and regulations. The Walmer versus City of Berkeley ruling says that if it's consistent with the state density bonus law, that inherently means it's consistent with the development code, understanding that you are allowed to have the waivers and reductions and incentives and concessions. The project has already been looked at through a CEQA lens at the M&D. There were no air quality, noise impacts, et cetera. And the project is served by utilities and public services. Also, the state is really kind of pushing the infill exemption as the exemption for housing and has passed additional laws and bills that reiterates their stance on this being kind of the correct exemption for housing projects. Oh, and I'll mention, I apologize, and there's no significant traffic defect. I know the traffic analysis has been discussed. So the traffic analysis done by our traffic engineers shows that there are no LOS issues, and also no queuing concerns and no additional turn lanes. So staff finds that there's not a significant impact for traffic. There's been a lot of public comments. I'm sure the commission has seen those online. We have a lot of people here to speak to them as well. A lot of them revolve around traffic and safety, snow storage, the wetlands, how much we need to follow state density bonus law, and the private issue on the Winter Creek roads. There was one more comment that came up in the May meeting, and that was on whether or not there could be kind of a change in crosswalk improvements. Engineering has been looking at that. They're going to look at more of a town-wide analysis of all of our pedestrian crossings, and we'll make recommendations based on these various characteristics, but engineering is not supporting a specific condition of approval specifically for this project. So this is the same summary slide I had last time, and I think it still fits pretty well. It shows the good and the bad. So the good, this is an appropriate location for high-density housing. It's rental housing in an infill location. It implements our housing element goals to provide housing for all of our community members. The not so good is that planning and planners really believe that these standards that we have for multifamily development produces a higher quality community, and that they're important to the residents and the surrounding community. In the last meeting, I listed private exterior space, community amenities, and open space. The changes that were made have increased some of these. So we do have more open space, and we have some provided amenities, so that does increase the livability for the residents. But of course, it doesn't meet our multifamily standards to the T. And as a reminder, the state really wants housing. The state views standards such as, private exterior space or additional amenities as barriers to producing housing. So that's why we see the state density bonus law written the way it is. As the onus is on the town and there's no documentation that we can request, staff doesn't believe the findings can be made to deny the incentives, concessions, or waivers and reductions, and recommends that the commission adopt Resolution 2024-08, approving the following actions based on the recommended findings and subject to the recommended conditions of approval, and that's determining the project to be exempt from CEQA with the infill development project exemption, Class 32, and to approve the development permit. As we know, there are alternatives that the commission can take tonight. That could be continuing the public hearing, adding, deleting, or modifying conditions of approval, denying the project, or requiring additional environmental review. And if the project is approved or denied this evening, the appeal period would end on Friday, August 30th at 5 p.m. And that concludes my staff presentation.
Thank you, Chantel. Do we want to go to an applicant presentation, or do we want to ask questions to staff?
I would suggest the applicant's presentation.
Okay.
Good evening, Commissioners. Martin Wood, Principal SCO, Planning and Engineering. Chantel, could you please maybe bring up just the comparison slide if that's possible? And first, I want to thank staff and the commission when we requested the continuance, a date certain to August. We made it. We're back here. It's been 3 months, but I appreciate staff helping us get here. So following the last hearing, if you will, we heard all the public comment. We heard a lot of suggestions from the commissioners, and we absolutely think asking for a continuance is the right thing. So following that, just a little bit of history of what we did. Within a couple of weeks of that hearing, there was a couple of neighbors, I think one was a board member, reached out to me. We had kind of a sit-down of 2-hour meeting in our office, and we went through a couple of schematic design revisions, if you will, and similar to, actually, Chantel, can you bring up the site plan comparison? That one? So we went through a couple different schematic options, and the simpler from our standpoint would have been to keep the road exactly the way it was and not adjust the site plan hugely, but I think there's some advantages to what we did here. We, as you can see, the central access that comes up the middle of the project is shifted a little bit more inward into the project, and that lessens the dead-end road length, if you will, or access length for the fire department, so that makes circulation just a little bit better. There was some suggestions, I think, at that last hearing about, did we look at 3-story and why not? So that's how we're able to free up the site plan here. We basically took 2 units and made them 3-story, and that allowed us to eliminate a building altogether. And it paid, in my opinion, huge dividends in how it loosened up the site. A lot of these snow shed issues, as you can see in the statistics, we were able to get more guest parking and more snow storage. And again, that's a balance. These are all issues that the HOA and neighbors brought up, and we could get probably more parking spaces and less snow storage. So it's a give and take at this point, but we think we kind of struck that right balance of more open space. We have a mini bocce ball. We have 2 outdoor seating areas. The 3-story buildings are kind of located more into the project, so the height and the massing has less of an impact. One of them is kind of closer to the hotel on the east side. And what that's going to create, all of these different design considerations is we're trying to create a more appealing view from the neighborhood and create some green space that we have kind of out in front there. So we feel some of those changes are huge. More snow storage, more guest spaces, more open space. I think the architecture got better with some of the covered things that we had to do before to make it meet, life safety and different things from snow shed off of buildings. So all in all of this stuff got better, in my opinion. So I also, just as we've gone through this process, the HOA was, obviously it got circulated again. There was letters going to the town. The town was reaching out to us, providing us some of those comments and asking about revised conditions that they were proposing. Basically yesterday, we, talking with the owner, we just said, look, we're going to call the HOA's attorney. He's been supplying letters to the town. We're just going to call him. And so we had a good discussion. And what I'd like to provide, if I can approach, I've got 5 copies here, if that's all right. What we, after talking with Kevin Rose, the HOA's attorney, he provided a list this morning of kind of their preliminary list, if you will. I don't want to say that it's everything that they're concerned about, but it was a list of a lot of things that concerned the HOA and the neighbors alike, right? And as we know, right, the unknown is always the worst, right? You don't know how the developer's gonna, if the project is approved, how is it gonna get it built out? All these things that could happen. You hear the horror stories. So I went through today and I wrote just kind of a response to comments. So my comments are in red, and I've talked that over with Reza, the owner, and we tried to address every one of the items in here. And I also forwarded before I left on my way up here back to your attorney, so he's got it as well for the HOA. But basically what I identified is where either town conditions deal with that issue specifically, or how a joint agreement from us following hopefully an approval, that we can write a really good agreement that gives some comfort on some of these issues. Everything from, we're not going to have dirty streets out there. We're not going to allow construction traffic to dirty up your streets. There's going to be the correct protocols that are kind of built into the town's conditions, as well as things that we're going to have in our improvement drawings. They're going to satisfy. That's just kind of one example. And I guess as hopefully you deliberate tonight, Commission, there are 2 or 3 that I think I marked in blue, and I put an asterisk, possible condition of approval, that we could even add something like that into the conditions just to make it ironclad, so some of these issues can be put to rest, that, look, it's going to be taken care of. It's not going to be an issue. We're all in agreement. So I'm hoping that pays dividends as you guys deliberate and hear the public comment and kind of go through. But basically what I can say is this is a real good faith effort. This is a delay of 3 months. I think it paid really good dividends in a much better project that hopefully we can all be, proud of, and the people that live there are going to enjoy much more. It's much less dense feeling. And I think the concerns over parking and snow storage, open space, and these recreational things, I think is a much better project. So really that's what I have to say tonight. Here to answer any questions. And like I said, the owner and our firm has spent a lot of time just trying to get this as best as we can coming forward. And I think that 3 months and that continuance that you offered.
Is this developer intending to go vertical or just get the entitlements and sell the project?
He asked me today about how long construction drawings would take. So I think his intent is to get it entitled and then try to work through some of these issues. We obviously have to get an agreement with the HOA and work through a couple of those things. But he's talking about doing improvement plans, so that is the intent.
Okay, and then do you have any idea what the rents would be for the market rate units?
Don't know. That's a really tough one in this environment. Until you get your true costs, what's infrastructure going to cost, building costs. Every year it's kind of it's a target. So rates will be dependent based on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else? How about for staff? So I've got one.
I do have a follow-up question, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Do you know if this particular developer has built in the mountains before?
I have not designed a project, but I can say that we just got one approved in the Tahoe Basin in Kings Beach.
I mean, specifically
So-
this property owner, have they built in this type of environment in the past?
I know he's got decades of development experience, so he's probably done many, many projects. I just haven't done one with him through construction.
Fair enough, thank you.
Yeah.
So Chantel, I'm confused on concession, the difference between a concession or a waiver reduction. Seems
They seem very similar, don't
Yeah.
they? A concession or incentive is something that provides a cost reduction, and they can only ask for so many. So depending on how much affordable housing they're providing, I think that they're asking for a development standard to be conceded on, so it seems very much like a waiver reduction, but I guess they could ask for something that isn't a development standard, which is where the waivers and reductions are. So they could potentially ask for, like, I mean, I'm spitballing, but fees to be reduced, or, help in a different way, something that's not development standard precluding that to be built. So I can go back if you'd like. I believe in my density bonus one, they give some examples. So a concession or incentive is a reduction in site development standards or a modification of a zoning code or architectural design requirement, approval of mixed-use zoning or other regulatory incentives or concessions which result in identifiable and actual cost reductions.
So it's pretty wide open.
Yeah.
Well, but they're only allowed one incentive per 5% of.
For a project providing 10%, at least 10% of their units is lower income, they get one, and then it moves on from there. But if you look at, and I pulled this wording is straight from state density bonus. So so here we are with the waiver reduction and development standards, and now we're talking about standards that could physically preclude building at a certain density. So maybe it would be harder to say a balcony would physically preclude you from building at a higher density because you would just pop it out, right? It's not taking up space on the site, where a balcony could be a financial, building a balcony does cost money, and not having to do that results in a financial, an identifiable or cost reduction. Believe me, we're all looking at the same law, same rules.
It says that's the same thing.
Did you not like my balcony comment, though? But the balcony, I think that's harder to say that that's physically precluding building more units.
Okay. So, which led into my very first question on my notes was, 5 units out of 40 allows them 7 waivers. I guess it's an unlimited amount of waivers and only 1 incentive, so they wrote the rules so similar that it's immaterial.
It does feel like that. I haven't seen any, here we haven't seen any more creative incentives requested. Maybe they could be more creative and, like I said, ask for money or different, rules to be waived. But here's the density bonus chart. So just doing 5% at very low gets you right into unlimited waivers and reductions.
Access off of Winter Creek Loop, since it's a private road, what does an acceptable agreement look like? What is the town looking for?
According to the town attorney, he wants a judgment by a court, which I think is, I'm not an attorney, like a quiet title action or something showing that there's that they legally have access. Or if they don't want to go that way, the other idea was that it would be a recorded agreement between the HOA and the developer saying that they're, without the court, they have access.
So assuming the HOA doesn't want to give access to Silver Creek, then they would need a court judgment to be able to travel over that road.
That is what the town attorney has determined.
And have we received any clarification as to whether or not or when Silver Creek exited the HOA?
It does not appear they were ever in the HOA. So what it looks like is when the subdivision was approved, the developer owned the single-family home sites and parcel B and just slated it for future development. Probably, we think that the intent was once he got the condo, project off the ground or decided to develop it, it would be put into the HOA as part of Winter Creek. We don't know what happened with the private sale. So that's kind of why, the question was there. I think we believe it's very likely they have legal access, but the attorney, their attorney contacted our attorney. And the reason I just want to mention, the reason that wasn't shared, their attorney letter said it was a confidential letter. So we shared what we could with the developer, that there's a question of access, that we're going to have to add this condition of approval to have it kind of hashed out before any development could occur. But it looks like their attorney is talking with the developer now.
And the Winter Creek drivers currently have access past the Silver Creek site, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
You have something, Marty?
if I may, I don't want to water or muddy the waters, if you will, but condition 28, I mean, we're not thrilled with the way it was written. And I had discussions with, basically it kind of started where there was a condition. Again, this is like comments from the HOA to the town, and then the town proposing conditions. And, you know, it first started with, hey, we don't want, the town wants to get involved even though it's a private road, want to determine what the maintenance contribution and all that should be. So there was some back and forth of that because, you know, per state code, we absolutely, for our portion of access that we're using, we have to pay for maintenance. That's snow removal, that's replacement costs, it's all that kind of stuff. So the town first proposed a condition that basically looked at the road from Brockway all the way to Palisades, okay? And then prorated that out of based on what the HOA, out of all the lots, and basically came up with a pro rata share of what we're responsible for our development. And understand that our roads internal, we have to maintain as well, right? That's not part of that. We have to, that in addition. So if you see in the letter that one of the things I responded to, I think on the 3rd page, I included that calculation in there, and that's more for the HOA for us to hopefully land on an agreeable agreement of what our contribution would be. But that was first derived from the town's condition. That morphed into that condition got removed. I found out today that got removed from the staff report, and we just have condition number 28, which I don't like the wording of it, but I was told from Andy Morris that that condition's going to stay. And again, I think there's good faith here going forward, and we want something reasonable and fair and equitable and all that. So I didn't bring that up in my initial thing, but 28, I feel kind of has the thumbs on the scale, kind of pushing on a private road thing. It kind of pushes in it. I mean, we don't want to get a court decree. We've talked to our council. You look at the final map that was just approved a few years ago in the town. It's a good map. Obviously, we have access on there. We can prove it. Our ALTA survey, or ALTA policy, when the project applicant or owner bought the property, they ensured access. So if we have to fight this in some manner, it's probably going to be the title company's attorney that might have to take that on. So again, I think all that could be sorted out if there's goodwill and reason, but I'm not a fan of condition 28. So that's.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Condition 28 is, says that they need to get legal access. So what I was asking staff is, what does that look like to staff? So the answer that staff gave us was it's either a judgment or the HOA, your HOA makes an agreement with theirs. So that is written in. So if this is approved tonight, they still have to get legal access before they can get a permit.
They have to demonstrate legal access. I think that's just a
Chantal, can you
minor
pull that
difference.
condition up on the screen for everyone?
That's correct, Commissioner.
It'll be just a second. Hold on.
It's demonstrated. I mean, I think that they have some access rights either conferred through the map back in 2004, or they've got some sort of an easement by necessity. So we think that it's there. It just needs to potentially be perfected.
I can go ahead and read it too for anyone that can't see. It says, prior to a building or grading permit issuance, the applicant will be required to demonstrate legal access to the property to the satisfaction of the town attorney for utilization of the Winter Creek roadways, specifically direct access from the project site to Brockway Road via Winter Creek Loop as a minimum. Legal access may be demonstrated by a final judgment of a court establishing access rights with a recorded agreement with the Winter Creek Homeowners Association addressing access rights or alternative documentation otherwise accepted by the town attorney. The legal access demonstration shall address maintenance responsibilities for the roadways within Winter Creek that Silver Creek needs for access to its property. So it does open it up to the lawyers can talk, I think, or there could be other means of demonstrating it, but we won't be issuing a permit until everyone's comfortable with there being legal access to the property.
Thank you. All right, most of my questions and comments have to do with the amount of waivers and concessions, et cetera, for 5 units. Just seems a little ludicrous to me. Anybody else on the dais have any questions for either the applicant or staff? Sammy?
Not at this particular moment, but
Okay.
maybe later.
Nobody? Dan? Coral? All right, then at this time, I'm going to open up for public comment. So you each will have 3 minutes. If you could line up at the podium. There'll be a clock, I believe, over here. You'll have 3 minutes to speak your piece.
Isn't the HOA considered an agency? Could we get a little extra time?
What was that?
Aren't we considered an agency in this process?
Not that I know of.
It was positioned on the,
The routing comments are where the agencies, I believe, jump in. So they were routed the project ahead of time and are able to make comment.
What does that mean?
That's how the HOA is treated, not
So
not
the
that
HOA gets more time?
No. That they well, here.
No, it's 3 minutes, whether you're an organization or not, unless the chair decides that you want to have another option. But typically, the chair is requested, those requests be made prior to the meeting.
Okay, so 3 minutes apiece.
all right, go ahead. So I have a statement that I'm not going to read because many things that were said tonight, I would like to have a point of clarification. So my name's Michelle Kosich. I'm the president of the Winter Creek Homeowners Association. And I submitted to the Planning Commission a pretty extensive list today of the things that are still open. I am not going to spend my time reading it back to you. But what I am going to talk about is things that were commented here. First and foremost, I'd like to have a copy of what he just provided you because I don't have a copy. We've had zero interaction with the developer. Zero. That's unconscionable. It's disingenuous, to be honest, that he wants to make you feel like he's working with us. We want to work with them. We want to work with the Planning Commission. We want to work with the Town Council. But there are parts of this that are unacceptable. And for him to make you think that he's actually working with us is absolutely disingenuous. The waiver for the maximum height was new for me tonight. I'd like to know what the Planning Commission's doing about the fire code. The fire code requires that you need to be able to have enough space to get into that development with a ladder truck, and there is not enough room. I'd like to know from staff if the fire commissioner, or the marshal, excuse me, approved this. The other condition of approval to address the Brockway crossing, do you know, according to our civil engineer drawings, those sidewalks are still not marked today. So not only is it a dangerous sidewalk, they're not even painted. There's 4 of them on Brockway to this day. It's unconscionable that we're going to put another 80 cars on the street and that's not even handled. So with that said, those are the things that were brought up that I just couldn't even believe that he brought up because we want to talk to him. And if you're not even talking to our board, there's a problem. And I do want to make an aside that the person that you mentioned that worked with you, he did that as an owner, not as a board member, okay? So we were not in favor of this development because of the safety and health issues that come with it. In the 46 seconds that I have left, I wanted to outline that the condition 28, I'm glad to see the wording in there. We are asking for additional conditions ourselves that are going to cover the health and safety issues. I've asked other board members to continue to highlight some of the things that not only we heard tonight, but things that are really important to us for health and safety, so that as you consider your vote tonight, that we need more time. We absolutely need more time because this is being rushed when we're finding out these types of things in a meeting tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm Sudsy Torbeck. I'm also an owner in Winter Creek, and I just would like to first, Scott, I've not met you, but we've corresponded, and I appreciate that. I thought you were genuinely trying to help with crafting a cost-sharing agreement. And so please don't think that, we were trying to be disruptive. We're a bunch of homeowners that towns and communities anymore have forced on us to take care of all these issues that really are out of the scope of what we do professionally. So it might take us a little longer to come to some conclusions, but we were told originally that any agreement that we entered into was a civil matter and should be done by an attorney. And so I see you writing a letter or writing up, ideas, and it's like, well, is the town, so you gave us the impression, you gave me the impression that you all were trying to craft an agreement that wasn't run through a proper legal system where we knew that we would be protected. So I wanted to clarify that with you. And yes, we have lots of questions, as to the development. When we enter into an agreement, who's in charge? Who's going to make these final decisions? We haven't, they contacted us first on, I think it was August 19th, and our attorney provided them with a list of things that we were kind of hashing around that we would need to come to an agreement with. And the comments that, I'm afraid that you being handed comments tonight that he had a list and now he's commented, we've not agreed to it. We just got this minutes before this meeting. And so I kind of feel like that's disingenuous as well. Do you think this is worthwhile? Okay. There you go. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Bonnie DeMartin. I am an owner in Winter Creek, and I would just like to speak to a few items the board and we as residents would like to have addressed. Number one, fire safety. We do not believe there is adequate access for Truckee equipment to address a fire in Silver Creek with the 2 3-story buildings. The new design has 2 3-story buildings. The fire code requires adequate fire trucks and ladder trucks access to have room to enter the roads in Silver Creek. The fire marshal has told us these roads are too narrow for ladder trucks. By approving a building permit, is the town overriding the fire code? We are proposing before a building permit is issued, a comprehensive plan must be published that addresses the fire equipment access supporting development with 3-story buildings. Number 2, bike path maintenance. We are seeking for the safety of walkers and bikers, and I walk that path almost every day with my dogs on Winter Creek Loop to Brockway, the bike path to remain open during construction. Number 3, parking safety and parking enforcement. The redesign plan for Silver Creek Estates does not change the issue around lack of parking. Winter Creek has zero ability to enforce the Silver Creek residents from parking on our private roads. Our CC&Rs do not allow any parking on the streets, yet we anticipate Silver Creek residents may spill over onto our neighborhood. What will the town of Truckee do for Winter Creek on this topic? The police chief has communicated with Michelle, stating the police will not ticket vehicles in Winter Creek. We are unable to contract with a private tow contractor, as it would require Winter Creek to pay in advance the fee to tow and required to do our own collections on the fees we pay to tow. In addition, based on feedback from 3 different tow companies servicing Truckee, we open ourselves to civil suit if we tow vehicles. In addition, the new parking plan does not address the loss of parking slots during the snow season. Snow removal operators are telling us Silver Creek can anticipate the loss of 2 to 4 spots for every 10 spots during snowfall season. This calculation is not addressed in the redesign. We are seeking the town of Truckee to develop a code that would allow Truckee police to come into Winter Creek to issue tickets for parking on our roads, a snow removal plan that articulates how they will compensate for the loss of the parking slots, and a plan showing how snow equipment will stay off our roads so they do not block residents with equipment during snow removal services. A condition of approval for a parking overflow plan and corrective action plan that addresses parking done on the Winter Creek streets. We are seeking a plan that puts the burden of parking enforcement and associated costs onto the owners of Silver Creek. We are requesting a comprehensive plan on how they will manage and enforce no parking on our streets, including towing, and to remove this burden from the Winter Creek Owner Association. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kathy Kadzie. I'm a resident of Winter Creek. Continuing on Planning Commission issues. Snow storage and off-hauling issues. We believe there are safety issues for Winter Creek residents due to off-hauling requirements. The design of Silver Creek does not provide adequate snow storage and requires off-hauling services, which we will believe create an unsafe ingress and egress for Winter Creek, getting in and out and preventing snow removal equipment for our neighborhood. In a normal snow year, Winter Creek has snow stacked in front of homes on an easement that builds 8 to 10 foot high, and our roads are reduced to one lane during winter months, which create blind spots. It's foreseeable the traffic view will be obstructed for the ingress egress of Silver Creek, and I have photos of that here, if anyone would like to see them. It is also foreseeable Silver Creek will have their off-haul equipment blocking our roadway loop, creating unsafe situations. We need an off-hauling plan which addresses the delayed nature of off-hauling snow in Truckee and costs associated. We are seeking the town of Truckee to add a condition of approval stating owners must provide a comprehensive off-haul plan that addresses keeping the snow storage off the winter roads. We're seeking proof of snow removal contract that can be entered into by Silver Creek due to the situation with limited space and haul-off requirements. We also want to drive awareness to the owner of Silver Creek on the cost to off-haul snow. We are requesting a comprehensive plan on how Silver Creek will deal with the snow given a 2-day off-haul delay. Safety issues crossing Brockway have been spoken about tonight, but there are also conditions. The rodeo was here last week. There were cars parked on both sides of Brockway and all the way into Winter Creek. What happens when the new library is downtown? We have less parking for other issues in the area. There is the Riverwalk, concerts in the park. Cars are already lined up on those streets. The town must address the unsafe crossing section. In non-winter months, the crossing's already scary at best and unsafe, but when you add snow berms, it becomes impossible. We are seeking a resolution to address this known safety issues in Truckee. The town of Truckee paint the crosswalk from Winter Creek over Brockway. Seeking Silver Creek to have local management. Without CC&R, Silver Creek does not have the tools to force renter compliance, especially when it comes to topics like parking, trash, disturbance, using garages for storage versus car parking, smoking, loitering on the premises, open fires and barbecues, repairing vehicles, abandoned vehicles, etc. Rentals can have a set of rules in their contract, but the mechanism for instance.
Thank you.
My name is Jim Booth. I am an owner in Winter Creek. Some of this is the same here. The Winter Creek Owners Association has a health and safety concern about the crossing of a major road from Winter Creek Loop over Brockway to get to the park, rodeo, farmers market, Riverwalk, concerts in the park, ball fields, tennis courts, play structures. With the increase of residents from Silver Creek, the town must address the unsafe crossing section. Non-winter months, the crossing is already scary, but at best unsafe. But then when you add snow, which is being piled inside of a Broadway, you have a blind intersection. And I may add that the traffic study that was done for Winter Creek and this thing was done by LSC Transportation Consultants on May 23rd from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. It has nothing to do with the way things are in the winter around here. And I know about safety crossings. Every day I walk my dog across that road. Nobody slows down. They're all going 45, 50 miles an hour. And maybe 1 out of 50 cars will come to a stop so somebody can safely cross, all right, on that road. And this is not me speaking by myself. What I would like to see is a 3-way stop sign situation put at that intersection, because that would help people be able, in the wintertime, people coming from the west going east cannot see a car coming out of Winter Creek. And if there was a stop sign, they would see that. People would be able to cross. Cars would be able to turn left, which I assume they're going to have a job in Truckee somewhere and be able to get to that job in the wintertime. And so I think it would not cost the town that much to put in a couple of stop signs that way. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shotzi, and I'm one of the original homeowners of Winter Creek. I purchased my home in 2006, and I'm a full-time resident. At the time I purchased my home, GLA Morris was the developer of Winter Creek, and I was informed that what is now called Parcel B was to be a small condominium complex, 20 condos, including a recreation center and pool to be shared with the rest of the Winter Creek single-family homes. This certainly was one of the compelling reasons I decided to purchase my home here in Winter Creek. As we're all aware, the economic downturn occurred in 2008, and GLA Morris sold Parcel B. It sat empty for quite some time. It was then sold again, and most recently sold to Neptune Investments, LLC, now Silver Creek Development. I wish to be perfectly clear that I am aware of the housing need in Truckee and in California. I'm not opposed to Parcel B becoming a housing area, except for the density that's proposed. My concerns are mostly safety for our residents, families, and visitors. With the proposed 40 apartments, this neighborhood will be hugely impacted. As a whole, a general observation, renters are less conscientious with regard to maintenance and caring for property. I understand long-term rental in this area is a minimum of 30 days. Some of the issues that may result with this development are noise and light pollution, trash, dog poop, traffic, and parking. Who will monitor illegal parking, use of our private open space, cleaning up dog poop and trash, potential crime and property damage, etc.? Our streets are narrow and therefore not maintained or plowed in the winter by the town. I live on Sarah Bear, and I'm very careful when I back out of my driveway. There are people, dog walkers, children, bicycles, mothers pushing baby carriages, and cars driving both directions. There are enough of these potential safety problems with just our 147 homeowners using the road. In the winter months, it becomes even more dangerous as the snowbanks prevent normal visual access. Access to Winter Creek from Brockway Road is hazardous now without the addition of 40 more units, providing more people and cars. For those who wish to go to the park area from Winter Creek Loop, will there be a crosswalk or a stoplight? In reading the correspondence between Town of Truckee attorney and the Winter Creek attorney, Sarah Bear is a potential thoroughfare to access Palisades Drive. I do not believe this to be necessary. Ingress and egress from Silver Creek development onto Winter Creek Loop can be made as a one-way in and out with a right turn only out of Silver Creek onto Winter Creek Loop, exiting out to Brockway Road. Palisades Drive is currently accessed from the intersection of the 7-Eleven stoplight. Thank you for listening to my comments and considering some changes to the current development proposals for Silver Creek to maintain safety and privacy for our Winter Creek owners.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Derek Iverson, and I'm a full-time resident of Winter Creek. And my comments are similar to those I shared during the May 21st meeting, and the plan development has incremental improvements for sure to the original proposal, but the health and safety issues remain the same. I'm providing a condensed version of those comments. The first risk is related to the increased number of project residents who will be using the Brockway Road crossing to access the Truckee River Regional Park, since local facilities are not sufficient within the plan development. And I'm sure the committee is aware of the dangerous accident involving a propane truck in May of this year at that exact pedestrian crossing. So the crossing will need significant improvements to make pedestrian usage safe. The second risk is related to the inadequate snow storage and the impact of parking roads and access to Winter Creek, as well as the proposed development. From what I understand, the storage calculations are incorrect for the areas designated for ramping, double the size, twice the amount was allowed, but they don't include the fact that it's ramped. So it's not double the size at all. So the calculation needs to be different for what is required for off-haul and approval. The off-haul requirements doesn't happen until several days after a storm, and will involve multiple pieces of heavy equipment, which will necessarily block access not only within the development, but as well as for Winter Creek. So there must be appropriate storage within development to handle the snow events when they recur and not days after. The third risk is to the safety of Winter Creek residents and the children living on Lower Winter Creek Loop, Sarah Bear, Colton Creek, and Justin Creek Road due to the project residents using those roads to access their apartments. It's naive to assume that project residents will not be using most of the roads within Winter Creek. We already see vehicles cutting through Winter Creek to avoid the intersection of Palisades Drives and Brockway. And the other comment is the traffic study provided by the town does not include any analysis of roads within Winter Creek, only the impact of access from Brockway entering Winter Creek. So it's just a Brockway statement. The town engineer has acknowledged in an email and with one of the versions of the proposed plan for sharing costs that there will be increased traffic flow within the Winter Creek neighborhood, and this is a significant increased risk for accidents within Winter Creek as a result of this project. So I'm hoping that you do not approve the development as it's currently proposed until these issues, safety issues, have been addressed. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joe Smith. I'm a resident of Winter Creek. It's interesting. It's similar to my observations I made Saturday at the Olympic Valley Advisory Committee in regards to the Palisades Tahoe Disneyland project for Olympic Valley. So much of this is trust and no verification versus verify and trust. I developed 14 hospitals in this country in 7 different states. I came before commissions, planning commissions, town councils, hospital groups, and guess what? As the senior VP of that company, which is one of the larger hospital development companies, I was there physically. So you talk about goodwill, Marty? Where's the good? The owner isn't even here. You're not the owner. So, you know, that shows very little respect for the residents whatsoever. So just understand that maybe doesn't come underneath the, you know, different issues we're looking at legally. But just from a tone, a feeling tone perspective, it feels like this is just being shoved down our throats. Number 2, my last comment at the last meeting was, what, does somebody have to die there before you do something? So 3 weeks after I made that statement, I'm on my bike, a propane truck. I don't know exactly what happened. Scott, maybe you can tell me what happened. I didn't see the traffic report. 3 people were hospitalized. It is a miracle somebody did not die in that particularly snapped a telephone pole in half and ended up in the friggin' wetland. I ride my bike 6 days a week, all around Truckee, out to Tahoe City. I'm on Brockway Summit Road all of the time. The traffic these days, forget 45 miles an hour. You're looking at 50 and 60 miles an hour. Everybody is in a hurry these days. So trying to get across that intersection right there is an extreme sport. First of all, if you're going to do something there, you don't just paint stripes there. You have flashing lights that come on to get other people's attention going in both directions. There's already been at least 4 accidents that I'm aware of. Maybe there's been more, but I have seen the results of 4 of them. So once again, is somebody going to have to die before the town does something? So I think there's just so many unanswered questions here that really need to be addressed. And most importantly, you have to respect the 145 homeowners in Winter Creek. Adding another 75 or 80 cars coming out there is complete to me. Same thing I told the Olympic Valley Committee about their answer was shelter in place for a fire because the congestion on 89 Olympic Valley Road be too high. I said, that's a death sentence. Guess what? That intersection is a death sentence.
Thank you.
Afternoon. So I just wanted to talk about parking.
Name?
Oh, sorry, Jai Gohel. I'm a homeowner actually just right across the from the proposed development. I want to talk about parking, but also how it impacts health and safety. These, from what I recall from last time's meeting, these are 40 units. They're all rentals. My understanding is that there's no restriction on the number of residents. That could be kids, it could be babies, it could be grandparents, it could be adults. The idea that 76 parking spots is going to cover all that and not have overflow into the Winter Creek community is completely absurd. You're going to have, first of all, there's no public parking within, I would say, at least a half a mile, probably close to half a mile. The closest public parking is on Palisades, and there's probably about 8 spots. So no one is going to be able to park. If they can't park in Silver Creek, they're going to have to park, or certainly, especially if they're only there for 30 days, or their buddies come over to, you got a bunch of young people, which is great. They have some affordable housing. They're packing into a small unit. They all bring their trucks, their cars, and where are they going to park? They're going to park on Winter Creek, on our property. I want to use the rodeo as a quick example of how this might look. Granted, the rodeo only happens once a year. We always have parking issues with respect to that. There was particularly bad ones this year. But this is what happened. There were cars parked on both sides. And I'm not suggesting that's going to happen every day with new development, but this is what happened. A bunch of the owners called the police to say, hey, this is illegally parked. Only one car could pass from Winter Creek onto Brockway because there were so many parking spots that were taken. People had parked on our private roads. And I spoke to this officer named Officer Futterman, very nice. She told me, we can't tow these, and we wouldn't even be able to cite them for a traffic violation. But we are, because you literally can't get access into your into the community. So there was a specific reason for traffic flow that they were able to cite these folks. Then what she said is, but if you want to tow them, you have to pay yourself. You have to pay yourself to tow these people. So what do you think the residents that are only there maybe for 31 days? I think the maximum they have to be there at least 31 days. That are they going to have an incentive with no on-site manager to tell people, hey, don't park in those people's lots? And we have no enforcement mechanism unless we pony up and take liability for towing these folks. It's going to happen. This is, the parking is going to cost. And I'll tell you, there were 2 people that came to my house who, because I was talking to the police, that came and yelled like, you MFer because we got a ticket. All right. You want to talk about safety stuff? There's a special penal code to protect traffic people, right?
Thank you.
Right?
Jai, thank you. That was an excellent intro. Hello, I'm Michael Kane, resident of Winter Creek since 2006. A very long time. I've probably entered the neighborhood from both entrances 10,000 times. So just in what Jai's saying, this is the Hennis Flats Apartments right here. This pink line here on the left is their property line, is their parcel.
I need you to speak into the mic, Michael.
It is their parcel, and Jai's point is the rodeo was one day and we had people all over the streets. This is the Hennis Flats apartment. Everything outside the pink line is outside their parcel. And I was over there on Sunday morning. I live here. I went over to see what Sunday mornings like. Most people are home, packed. In this section down here, which butts up to the Grays Crossing. So, Grays Crossing maintenance shed. This is kind of like no man's zone down here. You can kind of park. There's cars all over the place, nowhere. There's cars parked in the bike path, and easily cars parked right at the front entrance, as everybody sees. So we're talking, on any given day, you have 35 to 40 vehicles parked outside of their allotted 2 vehicle per unit regulation there. Thank you. So yeah, so what is going to stop that from spilling onto our streets? Thankfully, our new here number 28 looks like it could be, in our favor. So looking at this in full as a real event and a real safety issue for the neighborhood, thinking that this isn't in our best interests, as again, the developer's not here. There are 30 people here from Winter Creek who are concerned about the safety inside the neighborhood. The redesign doesn't change anything. You're still adding too many things into a small lot. Is this the best geographic area for the location? No. Is the snow storage really going to work? No. The cockamamie idea of adding snow on top of snow and getting calculations from that seems like fake math. I don't know how we're going to do that. And this isn't the first, something like this that you're probably going to have to decide on. This will set a precedent. We're unique. If we didn't have public or private roads, we wouldn't be here. We have private roads that we can regulate, and we hope to. We're not saying development can't go there. We're saying it has to be smart development. We're saying it has to work for both of us, and thus far, nothing seems to be working because we know Winter Creek will turn into a raceway. I know. I know when to leave on Brockway. I know when to go to the light. I know. There's no way people will not turn left, come down and out to Palisades. When I asked the town at the last meeting, well, what happens when this happens? They said it becomes a civil issue. So now, once again, as we say, we're stuck with a civil issue. I don't love living in a town where passing the buck, becomes a civil issue. Now what? We're like Jai said, we're stuck flipping the bill for towing cars. We don't want to tow cars. No, we're in the business of towing cars. Should we have to? I think, we will. So thank you. I really hope you really consider not adopting this evening. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Haney. I'm a full-time resident of Winter Creek with my wife. We've lived here for 9 years. The revisions to the proposal really didn't do much in our minds to correct the very serious public safety risks to the residents of Winter Creek, the future residents of Silver Creek Estates, Truckee residents that walk and bike through the Winter Creek neighborhood, those driving on Brockway Road, and really the town as a whole. I know you all understand that the streets of Winter Creek are much narrower than most streets in Truckee, and as a result of that, there's no on-street parking, or there should be no on-street parking, because parked cars would hinder access by emergency vehicles, and evacuation routes would be clogged. In the winter, as others have mentioned, the streets become even narrower, and the visibility is just about nil when you're trying to look over some of the berms. What I ask that you please understand is that our neighborhood has many walkers, bikers, pets, children playing, including our grandchildren, all year round. Because of the small lots and the lack of sidewalks in most of the neighborhood, almost all of that pedestrian activity takes place on those narrow streets. You have to understand that in our neighborhood, people hang out, they socialize in the streets, they walk their dogs, their children play in the streets, winter or summer. The increased traffic on the narrow Winter Creek streets that will result from the additional 70-plus cars coming from Silver Creek poses a serious safety hazard for everyone in the neighborhood, and it would also make evacuation in case of a fire that much more difficult. Our primary concern is for the safety of the children in Winter Creek and Silver Creek Estates. The revised proposal provides very little place for children to play. The only place for them to play will be in the parking lot or on the narrow streets of Winter Creek, which will have significantly increased traffic. People have talked about Brockway Road. If the logic is the kids can cross Brockway to get to the regional park, that's tricky for an adult. It's impossibly dangerous for a child. So I just think we all need to admit that it was a huge mistake for someone to purchase that small plot of land, thinking they could safely squeeze 40 units onto a plot with narrow surrounding streets, few sidewalks, and no place for kids to play without crossing a dangerous road.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm John Kedzie, also a permanent resident at Winter Creek. I'll try not to be redundant. I think most of the speakers have covered the major points. I just want to point out that our neighborhood is a mature, already dense neighborhood with teeming with children and pets playing freely in the streets. Our neighbors are all considerate and know each other, and we drive carefully, but you're adding 40 sets of people who are not stakeholders, who have no necessarily vestige in us, and it just seems like the probability of accidents due to speeding, distracted driving, getting where you got to get, cutting through the neighborhood is a natural outcome. So a solution that I think is to block access to Sarah Bear and Winter Creek going into Winter Creek from Silver Creek. That could be done with a gate, could be done with one-way sign. I understand Truckee doesn't allow gated communities, but is putting a gate at one end of a community the definition of a gated community? I don't think so. It still has free access on the other end, but it would prevent all of the issues of safety, be a minor investment, and then we'll see how the traffic piles up on Brockway as people go to work at 8 in the morning trying to make left turns, and the traffic engineer thinks there's no problem. We'll find out. So the other issue is the purpose of this project is for additional truck worker housing. Has anybody evaluated whether that's going to do anything to that? You can't demand what the rent's going to be. You don't know what it's going to be. You don't know who's going to afford it. So we're taking all this on faith, but to do that, you're permanently changing an existing viable neighborhood. And I think more due diligence ought to be done to inquire and require some way to have affordable housing out of this. Because there's no guarantee that I heard of. We can't tell. We don't know what the costs are. Well, make some estimates. Do some studies. Do something that shows me that this will be affordable for the workers at Truckee, not for people coming into here for low-income housing or something. Or just more expensive apartments that isn't going to solve the real problem you're trying to address. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Matt Kerr. I'm a full-time resident at Winter Creek Loop. I know for all of us, this is an emotional topic, so for the sake of helping you make your decision tonight, I'm going to stick to some indisputable facts. So California has a housing crisis, and as such is allowing for developers in towns like Truckee to sidestep town building code and regulations to help ease the crunch a bit. As I stated in my last comments to you all, none of us here today are opposed to development on this land as it was originally intended. Where there is a problem and why all factors need to be considered is purely based on safety. This project is absolutely the right project for Truckee. However, it's being proposed in the worst location imaginable. And allowing high will create tremendous safety concerns, not only for those living in Silver Creek Estates, but also for those taxpaying citizens that already live in Winter Creek itself. Now, I understand that my last statement could be considered subjective, so walk with me a bit as I share some facts as to why safety is a major concern. Winter Creek is very unique, not only because of the amazing people that live there, but also because of the concessions that were made in the initial building and design of our neighborhood. Our streets are significantly more narrow than every other public street in Truckee. As such, we maintain our roads and shoulder the burden of snow removal in Winter Creek, and especially in the winter. Now, due to the narrowness, residents and visitors are not allowed to park on our streets. In the winter, the streets get even more narrow. The snowbanks at the end of the mostly short driveways create perilous backing out scenarios, and every year there are close calls and/or accidents between those visiting or full-time residents. Now, one of the most dangerous road hazards that we talked about tonight is the intersection of Brockway Road and Winter Creek, just down from the Silver Creek residents, where they'd be expected to leave and return home. The snowbank here gets so high that it's almost impossible and very dangerous to make a left-hand turn on a Brockway Road. This is where you are setting future residents of Silver Creek up for failure. Accidents, injury, and even death are all predictable outcomes here. So they will quickly learn to avoid that turn in the winter, and where will they go? They're going to go rolling down our narrow and icy streets full of blind driveways, small children and pets towards Palisades Drive, where they can use a stoplight to safely navigate. So, what do I got? 50 seconds. So the solution, place a stoplight, paint crosswalks, create a safe route for cars, pedestrians, all of that. However, citing a traffic study done in May, town officials stated that they will not entertain this and instead suggested that we call the town to prioritize the snowbank there in the middle of blizzards. There's some other major concerns. Where are the residents going to park while they're clearing the snow from the parking lots, as they can't park on our streets? Why allow another unmanaged high-density development when you already know the outcome and negative impacts that have played out in Truckee elsewhere? And I will say this again, it's the right project for Truckee, but proposed in the worst imaginable location. I urge you to please protect our current and future residents of Truckee by acknowledging the mountain of safety concerns and voting no today. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jim Francis, and my wife Lucinda and I are full-time residents of Truckee and Winter Creek. We wanted to express our concerns along with our neighbors and other residents this evening about the safety concerns that really are not addressed in the revised proposal, unfortunately. Particular concerns are around traffic coming out of the project, as mentioned by earlier speakers, and parking as well. Again, this issue, I think, Martin, you suggested that the developer was working with the homeowners association, and Michelle had mentioned that conversation has not occurred. Really going through an attorney at this point after working on this project, I think, Chantel, you mentioned this has been worked on for a couple of years, right?
2021.
Yeah. And so there's been literally no communication whatsoever with this developer, with any of our neighbors, with the homeowners board, as far as I know, or any citizens of Truckee. And again, as the earlier speaker noted, where is this developer? I think it disrespects the process, it disrespects the town staff, and it disrespects you. So in conclusion, I think the CEQA law gives you an opportunity tonight to decline this project. There's a clear public safety issue. And I'm not sure what the process for citizens to appeal or somehow get additional safety studies done or performed. There's clearly, you've heard it tonight, a deep disagreement between the citizens of Truckee and the town staff on the issue of traffic safety. There's no question that is in dispute. Now, tonight, you can go with the staff and rely on them, or you can listen to the folks that live in your community, that ride their bikes here, that raise their children here, and decline this project on account of safety. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Barbara Kane, and I'm a full-time resident of Winter Creek. I'm going to bring something a little bit new that we haven't talked about. It is school bus access, pickup and drop-off. Given the Silver Creek designation as a multifamily development, we can expect many families with children. We've talked about them at all the presentations. These children will require safe and efficient access to school bus transportation. We know the heavy school bus traffic that currently utilizes the route boarding the Village Green Mobile Home Park. This includes buses picking up and dropping off approximately 50 children between 6:45 a.m. and 9 a.m. for the mornings, and then 2:45 p.m. and 4 o'clock. This is a rush hour for all of us to get to work. Has the developer or the Planning Commission contacted the Tahoe Truckee Unified School District Transportation Department to assess the Silver Creek impact on school transportation? I also wonder if the traffic study consider bus routes. School buses cannot currently navigate the Winter Creek neighborhood streets. When buses stop at the mailbox entrance, they completely block the access, creating a dangerous situation for children waiting and residents trying to enter and access Winter Creek at rush hours. This increased traffic congestion caused by school buses will significantly impact residents, particularly during mornings and afternoon routes. Commuters will likely use Winter Creek roads to avoid delays waiting for the bus, load and unload. Further exacerbating traffic congestions and damaging roads conditions, especially during morning hours during storms, where our plows are going through our roads trying to clean the access. This would create dangerous conditions for everyone driving in our neighborhoods. Other recent developments in the town of Truckee have failed to consider the needs of school children and their transportation. This has resulted in ongoing difficulties for the Tahoe Truckee Unified School District in providing safe and efficient services to these areas. The Silver Creek's developments will for sure add to the existing challenges of safety transporting children to and from school. We urge you to prioritize the well-being of our children by addressing these concerns before you approve this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment. Thank you all for your thoughts. With that, I believe we will open for deliberation amongst ourselves. Who'd like to start? I'd like to address some of the comments I heard today from the audience. And I will start off with fire safety came up a bunch. There is no way this project would get approved without proper fire safety approved by the fire district. So if those buildings require ladders, trucks, and those ladder trucks can't get in, this project wouldn't get approved as it's currently.
When the developer was looking at the 3-story height, we sent a basic site plan over to the fire marshal, and the fire marshal approved the current configuration. So the fire district has looked at it and approved the fire apparatus travel. So that was done prior to proceeding to the full project routing.
Thank you, Chantal. And that's not a surprise to me because that's just a basic requirement for any development. And if you'd noticed in the presentation by the staff, they specifically said that they can't get waivers or concessions for fire safety. That has to happen. So rest assured that it will be approved by the fire department, and the equipment, if they think can make it, will make it. I like the concept of making sure the bike path remains open, and in my super quick perusal of what Martin gave us, I can't speed read, so I didn't read all of this, but I think there's something in there about keeping the bike path open. Keep in mind that Winter Creek had its concessions itself when it was approved. That's why your streets are so skinny. That's why there are those houses there. So in order for that to be approved, those streets were made private. A suggestion that was made to me by an unnamed person, thank you, to keep the speed down is speed bumps. Sierra Bluffs up in Glenshire has speed bumps. And you're still concerned about speeding? Then I can't help you beyond that. I'm sorry. I can't help you, and I can't have a back and forth with you. I'm sorry. What else do we have? That's it. Somebody mentioned the library, and the library comes with a lot of parking. So there will be parking there. I do personally agree with the crosswalk. I know I brought this up last time and Scott shot it down, but I'm going to bring it up again, that I think there should be at least a painted crosswalk at that intersection. That's all I got. Anybody else?
Chair Claren, would you like me to talk about the sidewalk or the crosswalk at all? It's up to you.
If you're just going to come up with your numbers that say it doesn't justify a crosswalk?
No, not necessarily.
You got something else?
Yeah, so we get requests for crosswalk improvements all the time, all throughout town. This isn't the only location. It sounds like there's already an existing concern, regardless of this project. We've been discussing kind of how to approach crosswalk improvements throughout the years. And we're starting to look into kind of how should we analyze crosswalk improvements throughout town, not on like a project specific basis. And so the typical approach for most agencies is to develop kind of an implementation policy, which is based on roadway speeds, traffic generation, pedestrian generation, sight distance, those types of things. And so engineering thinks it's kind of inappropriate to identify specific crosswalk improvements for this project, which is based on an existing concern, rather than looking kind of at a holistic approach town-wide. And so that's why Chantal had that slide pulled up, that we're beginning a process to look at crosswalk improvements town-wide. The best course of someone had asked what the best course of action is of how do we request improvements. Service requests on the town website would get it directly to the engineering division, then it's in our system, and then we would respond accordingly with like what that process looks like of how we're improving crosswalks. So it's not that it's not necessarily warranted, it's that it seems inappropriate to apply a recommendation to the town engineer to implement crosswalk enhancements on a project that isn't necessarily like changing the character of that crosswalk. They've already mentioned that it's already a concern. Sounds like a service request that's already existing.
Question for Scott.
Folks.
Scott, what's the time frame look like for that study in that more comprehensive plan?
Sure. So it depends on staff capacity. We developed a similar kind of policy for radar speed feedback signs. The past couple of years, they can take a little while depending on capacity. We've already started the process to kind of look at other agencies, what they're doing, hopefully to help us kind of have a clear path on how we'd like to do it. I don't have a time frame for you on that one. As soon as reasonably possible based on work capacity.
I have a related clarifying question, I think, for staff, kind of on the traffic thing. If I recall, there was something in the routing comments, there was a conversation with TTUSD, and wasn't there a follow-up to that? Could you just reiterate that, please?
Sure. So TTUSD was routed every time this project has been routed. So back in 2021 and twice in 2023. They have a new director of transportation who wasn't aware of the routing, and I think a member of the public had reached out to him and told him it was an affordable housing project that was coming in. With affordability, there are requirements for providing bus service that aren't there for providing bus service for any student. So Scott and I actually met with Mr. Labasso, or Labeso, I might say it wrong. We had a Zoom call. We sent him the documents that had already been sent, and he no longer had concerns. So that's where we left it.
Thanks, Chantal.
Okay. Dan.
Got a bunch of comments, questions here. On-site management is required, isn't that correct? For over 16 units in California?
Not that I'm aware of. Is that a building code?
Pretty sure it's a statewide.
I mean, management is required through my condition of approval. They need to follow all state and federal laws. So if that's a state law, then it sounds like they would need on-site management.
Sure it is. Martin, do you know that?
All I know is what we indicated at the last meeting is that there was the intent of the owner is to use a local property management company. That was his intent.
Yeah, California law requires apartment complexes with at least 16 units have an on-site manager. That is a statewide law. So I would guess they would need someone.
Do you have a number, a code number or something for that?
Looks like it's Title 25, Section 42, at least based on what I'm seeing. We're not sure I think we'd have to run through the applicability of that with the town attorney.
So one question I could have for the developer is, can they identify which unit is the manager's unit?
I can only say I don't know which unit we would provide, but if it's a state law, we're going to comply. I mean, just like town codes, we're trying to comply. So.
We talked about the Brockway crossing
So
concern.
would that be a condition of approval then if staff wants to make a note on that?
If it's a state law, does it really need to be a condition?
We don't say, I mean, we don't usually have conditions that say you meet certain state laws, but I think it's probably in one of our standard conditions. I'm sorry.
I don't know. We were just Googling this, but I mean, what I saw said that it had to be 16 units in a single building, not on site. So if that's what the requirement is, that's what the state requirement is.
And I'm
You're right.
seeing
We wouldn't need to create a special condition for complying with state requirements.
Yeah, I'm seeing apartment complexes and residential communities. At least 16 units. That's how I would interpret it. The crossing Brockway concerns, I'm going to agree with Scott. Sounds like that's already an issue that a lot of people deal with. I don't know if there's a way to put that intersection higher on the list. It is a dangerous intersection. It is hard to cross there. People do go super fast. The fire truck access, the only letter I saw in here is from 2021. Have they reviewed these plans?
Yes, they've been routed every single set of plans, and we had a kind of original conversation before the developer solidified the new site plan. Actually, that was kind of an ongoing issue with the many iterations of this project, was to make sure that there was fire apparatus and fire ladder availability. And so either Chief McKechnie and now Fire Marshal Kessman has approved every single layout of the development.
I just want to add exactly what Chantel said, but in addition to that, 2 of the aisle locations, we widened by 2 feet because they looked to the specifics of where their outriggers on the ladder truck would go. So they went to a very high level of detail of how they would fight a fire, how they'd set up their equipment. It's very detailed.
I heard a comment about light pollution. I assume all fixtures would be dark sky compliant to meet Truckee code.
They would meet all our exterior lighting requirements.
Does Winter Creek have a snow off-haul plan? Do you guys ever use it? Let's see, the parking concerns. Martin, are these all going to be long-term tenants? Or are people really going to be doing 30-day rentals and then turning it over to another rental?
We're going to comply with the town code. Obviously, that's what he wants is long-term clients. He doesn't want a high turnover, but we're going to comply with what the code says.
I thought the solution to gate Winter Creek was interesting. I wasn't unaware. There are no gated communities allowed in Truckee?
Yes, by both the 2025 general plan and the 2040 general plan, there's a prohibition on gated communities.
What about that community in the back of Prosser? What's that called?
Prior.
Prosser was it for?
Yeah, the gated communities we have were prior to the adoption of the last general plan.
Could they do something like make those streets one way or put a no throughway sign? Or
I mean, we feel that the intent of the prohibition on gated communities are to keep communities whole and not trying to section off different types of residents from different areas. So I don't believe that that would meet the intent of our general plan.
Could not a throughway street or not a through street signs be posted somewhere, that left-hand turn, just to discourage traffic through?
It's a private street.
Would that be conditional approval or?
I mean, it's a private street, so there might be some, leeway to signage, but I think you would also need to check with fire and police. There's still, it's a private street with emergency access allowed, so I think you would have to maintain whatever kind of access you would need for emergency access.
But Winter Creek could manage their own signage?
Like no trespassing?
They maintain their own signage. So the way the developments work in Truckee, whether it's private or public infrastructure, so these roadways, they're all routed through the town engineer for approval, and those are based on typical recognized traffic engineering standards. There's a kind of a weird area there where you're putting up arbitrary signs that aren't actually correct. Like in that case, not a through street. It is actually a through street. So there's the potential that they could ask the town engineer to consider allowing them to modify the improvement plans that they were approved for back in the early 2000s. But usually it's based on traffic engineering standards and the uniform traffic control devices. So it's kind of a weird area.
So a sign like private neighborhood, no trespassing would be okay because it's not interrupting emergency services.
Sure.
What else you got?
Yeah, go ahead. Jump in.
Yeah, just related to that, is staff aware of other privately maintained roads in town that might have similar issues? And do those neighborhoods have towing programs or some kind of enforcement that could provide a model in this case?
The privately maintained road that I can think of doesn't have a parking issue. They are going through, this was a previous project, they are going through issues with trying to figure out road maintenance costs and who's responsible, and that is, delaying. I mean, we won't issue a permit or let them submit for a permit until they figure that out in a civil manner. But they're kind of out on the outskirts of town, so there's not a parking issue we're aware of.
That's what I picked up.
Thank you. How about this side, Sammy?
I mean, I think the street traffic is certainly still concerning. I understand that, town's desire to take a comprehensive and holistic approach to that, so that is something that I do understand. But since Winter Creek is a privately owned, I'm guessing, and maintained street, I mean, it seems like it's always been the HOA's responsibility to enforce parking restrictions on that street. I know that can be difficult. It sounds like it is, and that there's an understanding, which is great for neighbors. But these also will be your neighbors. So I think, you have the opportunity to welcome them as neighbors and also communicate some of the expectations as neighbors. I'm not saying that's easy, but it's also something that we do as a community. Also, since it is a private street, you may have the option, in coordination with engineering, to look at your circulation patterns on your streets to make them a little bit more, safe. Considering one-ways, considering other options might be possible. So I think exploring that further, I don't know what we can do in terms of conditions of approval or anything to encourage that, besides the one that's been included, number 28.
What about right turn only out of Silver Creek? Can we make that a condition of approval?
Again, so typically implementation of signage is based on traffic engineering standards, manual and uniform traffic control devices. Right turnouts are typically restricted when you're crossing multiple lanes of traffic, where it's otherwise unsafe to cross multiple lanes of traffic, where then it would be an example. So maybe...
The question, Scott, is can it be done? It's a yes or no question.
It could be requested.
Thank you.
Considered.
Go ahead, Sammy, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm just looking at the map of access points on Winter Creek Loop and then with the development. We're trying to come up with a solution that works or is better for everybody. Nothing's going to be perfect. I also want to say that. But we really are trying to make something work. But I'm open to hearing people's thoughts about a right turn only and or some kind of circulation, manager that might help.
How about even just a notice to the tenants from the developer as just a request, hey, please be considerate of our neighbors, don't drive through Winter Creek. It's not going to have 100% effect, but maybe you get 75, 80% of the tenants say, okay, fine, we're going to take it right.
I don't know if we can request things be put into lease language as commissioners or considered by the developer to be included.
You can use wording like the Planning Commission recommends. You've done that in the past.
I think that's probably more what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And 10 years from now, when the Neptune sells this place to someone else, it's going to be up to local managers to.
That's why a sign is a little bit more permanent and obvious.
I think maybe it can be a combination of things that we recommend doing. But recommending seems kind of like our strongest kind of action that we can take related to this particular topic.
I'm not sure why we couldn't require a right turn sign, Scott. Why couldn't we, as commissioners, require it?
Sure. Because the jurisdiction for implementing signage, traffic control devices is bestowed upon the town engineer by town council. So it ultimately be the town engineer's determination, and it would be based on traffic engineering standards, which, again, additional signage that's actually incorrect is not the standard approach for implementation of signage.
Yes, that's not incorrect, though. It's just encouraging people to not trespass onto private road. There is a reason for it,
sure,
right? We're trying to stop people from driving on a private road.
Sure, but if they're required to document access rights to those roads, and the access rights say that they have the right to utilize those roads, that would be an incorrect sign.
Yes,
right?
But if it, most probably they're going to agree or they're going to get a judgment to go from Brockway Road to the second entrance into Silver Creek and stop right there. Most probably. So under that assumption that that's what the agreement ends up being, then you put in a right turn sign only to stop people from going on private property. That would work. In my mind, that works.
So if it's a right turn only sign on the Silver Creek development, not on the town right of way. So it's just a nice wooden sign that the residents see as they leave. It says right turn only. Right turn suggested, right turn please.
Bring it on, John. Okay, and then one more thing, John, you had brought up something about the rental units or whatever, cost-wise. Only 5 of these units are affordable, so they're the only ones that are deed restricted. The rest of them are going to be market-based. So in a basic capitalist system, as we all know, you're going to try to get as much money as you can out of those. So in theory, the higher you're charging for rent, the better class of people you're going to get, theoretically.
I can't concur with that.
Can we not
generalization?
phrase it like
Maybe not.
that? Yeah.
Maybe not.
And we know that the deed restricted units are 60% AMI, so there will be a cost associated them with that is independent of whatever the market rate rental fee
Right.
is.
That's correct.
Like that's not like the deed restricted units are defined, so it's not based on market rate, but it's
5 units. All right. Staff had some. Go ahead, Coral. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I had a couple of comments. First of all, from what we've heard from a lot of residents here, it sounds like this neighborhood, Winter Creek, enjoys a very lively urban setting. This is a high-density neighborhood, with small clearances, narrow streets. People have chosen to live there. It provides a lively urban setting. It doesn't really seem, it seems somewhat unfair to me to object and deny so much that other people might be able to enjoy a lively urban setting close to town amenities like the park and downtown. So I'm really hoping we can find some solutions here. We've got some suggestions and some possible conditions, and making sure the bike path is there, maybe trying to prioritize that intersection. Perhaps if on-site management isn't required by state law, include it as a condition, and we can recommend that the HOA implement a towing plan or develop a towing program to help with their parking situation. I think maybe we could make a recommendation in that respect as well. Density's needed. This is a dense project, and there are only so many levers we have to pull on it. So let's look at what we can. Go ahead.
Dave.
I think we're setting ourselves up for failure here. I think that the parking is going to be in boondoggle. I think and we're kidding ourselves if we don't look at that. I think the wintertime access, I think this is a safety issue. I mean, I'd have to say I share the opinion of everybody that got up and spoke tonight. I'm not in favor of this project.
You're smiling, Dan. What's that? All right, deliberation. The staff had some suggestions on what we should be deliberating on. I'd like to start there and go from that. Can we bring that up? Thanks. So a lot of the issues that I have with this project are all STBL, either concessions or waivers, which ties my hands, unfortunately.
Let me bring up the exact wording for I know we're talking about public health and safety. It's the adverse impact. So if that's what you're trying to understand.
No.
These are the findings you have to make if you were to not approve a waiver or reduction or incentive or concession.
Question to our builders and developers here. do these concessions and reductions, would they result in a cost savings?
Every concession results in a cost savings.
So that's a
Period.
non-starter.
So yeah, the law is written that all you have to do is say, I can't afford it, and then you don't have to do it. It's pretty much how the law is written.
I mean, I think it's a substantial evidence, right? I think we can, staff can agree that not providing a deck or a patio is a cost saving, not even as a developer.
Well, any of it is stacking 3 stories instead of building 2 buildings. That's cheaper. The most expensive parts of building is foundation and roof.
That's not.
So if I can stick more square footage underneath the same foundation and roof, then I'm saving money.
That's not requested for the financial part of it. That's being requested under the waiver and reduction. So that's the effect of physically precluding building to the density. So those are and that's what all the other waivers and reductions are. But I can understand that you could say the same thing.
It is the same thing.
Just wanted to make sure we were on the same page with that. That's nowhere. If it's not contrary to state or federal law, that eliminates number 5. It doesn't affect anything on the National Register of Historic Resources. That takes away number 4. It doesn't physically preclude it. Takes away number 2. It seems like it's consistent with the density bonus or other incentives, though that only leaves number 3, which seems to be the primary concern of our public commenters, is a specific adverse impact, potentially several. So I think we just have to focus on that.
That's correct.
How do we, this body, quantify, measure, or confirm, public health and safety?
Well, we have a traffic study. We haven't done a community impact study since the original CEQA work. Seems like that might be one. Traffic, access, any access problem associated with this is really already there. How many times have we heard about the narrow streets and how hard are they to navigate in the winter? That's already there. 70 more cars a day, or however many cars were listed in the traffic study.
That go through Winter Creek? That's just the first part of the street. That's not into the neighborhood.
I just want to focus the discussion is all.
So I'm correct in saying that traffic study didn't study any traffic going through Winter Creek, going through the subdivision.
That's correct. So it analyzed worst case scenario for level of service thresholds at Brockway and Winter Creek, because that's the established threshold by town council.
Thank you. So health and life safety would have to be the issue. What do you have, Dave?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that...
What is it?
What do you mean, what is it?
What's your health and life safety issue? What is it?
I think that we're going to have illegal parking. I think that it's going to be, is the fire department taking into consideration how they're going to get a truck in there when there's a huge blaze going on and there's 5 cars on the side of the road that are parked in the town right away, just like Hennis Flats? I mean, that's
the fire department's job to determine if they can make that work or not.
I don't think they're looking at that part of it. They're looking at, what is drawn, and I'm talking about what's actually going to happen.
Yeah, they've looked at a plan and see, can we fit our truck through the street there? And they can say, yes, they can. But, we did see an example or an anecdote about the parking at Hennis Flat. And yeah, something like that could happen on it, where there's an event. The conditions do require assigned parking. I don't know if there's any way to make that more onerous to control off-site parking.
So this SDBL says they only need 45 parking spots. Is that correct?
No, we just can't require any more than 48.
That's correct. That's the.
There's
the
almost there. I'm sorry, Chantal.
No, that's great. No, you have it. You have it completely correct. It's either 48 or 45, but there's a limit for any density bonus project of how many
And they're providing 76.
they're providing.
Nearly 2 per unit.
More than the requirement.
Correct.
And I believe 9 less than what would be required outright for any density for a non-density bonus project.
Right.
Where do the traffic impact fees go? They aren't earmarked in any way, are they?
No, they go into the traffic impact fee program that's utilized for various intersection improvements throughout town.
All right. Well, Sammy, what are you thinking on health and life safety for this?
I mean, based on what I'm seeing, based on what I've heard, I understand the issues. It very much seems like there is an existing safety problem that may be exacerbated by this development. However, it's also an existing problem. So again, our hands are a little bit tied with what we can do. The project is already going above and beyond and what it is required to do by the state density bonus law with parking, et cetera. Again, I think the key is really whatever comes out of that access agreement and enforcement, agreement that you guys can make with the property owner and developer. That seems to be where this needs to be solved. I don't know if we can solve it here. And that is already included as a condition of approval.
Dan, do you have any health and life safety issues?
It's easy to say the what ifs when there's a giant fire and there's 10-foot snowbanks but a little bit we can't live our lives like that and can't rule like that or govern like that. I mean, there's got to be a set of rules. Traffic study, they said what they said. I don't think we can say, yeah, is there going to be a parking problem? For sure, there will be. It will happen. But there was when there was the rodeo. There is on Truckee Thursdays. There is when there's music in the park.
Oh,
whatever. Like when we have events in town, all kinds of neighborhoods deal with local traffic issues and local parking issues. It is what it is. Doesn't mean you don't do a project or do a development. And also, if we deny this tonight, this will get appealed, go to council and approved. Because their mission is to create housing. But so don't think like this is, if we say no, also we're not giving this project a building permit. They have to go through all the stuff. It's probably 2 years till they break ground.
At least. Coral?
It's tough. Need housing. It's a very tricky situation. I can look at this aerial map and there's no other way to get in or out unless you want to route some of the traffic through the Village Green Mobile Home Park. Oh, private property. That again.
What was the original 2006, 20 condos?
Yeah, but it was.
So we're talking about 20 more.
We're talking about a difference of 20 more from when many of the residents there purchased their homes.
And we don't know what the bedroom number count was in those condos either.
It wasn't an actual, so it was on the tentative map, so it was not a fully formed project.
It doesn't mean that they couldn't put the same 35 units on before STBL came. It means that he was just going to put 20 only. It doesn't mean he couldn't have put the 35 on.
So it would have been 20 more. It would have been 3 and 4 bedroom, probably condos. It's probably the same number of bedrooms in that project I have right now.
It's irrelevant.
It's irrelevant.
Correct.
To me, it relates to the objection. And no, you can buy a house near the airport and it's going to be noisy. And 10 years later, that's not the time to complain about it.
All right.
But it's very tough to weigh that versus, you know, the safety of people in the streets, particularly children who don't know not to run in the street.
So I guess, are there any conditions we want to add to this?
I think we should add one about the bike path. That's a different topic. That seems like a pretty simple thing, that either, you know, the bike path should be maintained, or there should be a bike lane provided with cones or signage to keep that, if at all possible during construction. It looks like to me the bike path runs along the west edge of the property. I believe I wrote it right before the last meeting.
Also, were there any of these issue statements and responses that we wanted to talk about? The list of issues that we got was the list that was included in the HOA letter and responses to that.
Yeah, so one of the
saying what it
possible
was.
conditions that was included on here was a parking plan. Will be shown and indicated on the improvement plans as part of a grading permit issuance. This is for contractor parking, for construction parking. Is that, if that's not a normal engineering requirement, can we put a condition in there that says contractor parking has to be on site to minimize impacts to the neighbors?
I mean, we should put Martin's recommended added conditions of approval, just because.
I agree.
More stuff.
They're conditions on themselves. There are two of them shown on here, I believe. Mailbox protection and the contractor parking. And then my notes say maybe we need a condition about the bike path.
Right turn
There's
lane.
one on here confirming Winter Creek amenities
Sign.
may not be used by Silver Creek owners. I don't even think that's feasible or realistic. Kids are going to go to the playground they're going to go to.
So this is a little difficult for us only because we received this at 5 the same time you did. And I know it's not part of the record. I mean, I'll obviously put it up online. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, I guess we're trying to clarify with the applicant, is this part of their project description? Is this part of their public comment? Because otherwise it's presenting new information at a hearing that wasn't available.
Do you mind if you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Our public comment, like I said, I got the thing about this. I said conditions of approval, so I think that would be appropriate to add those if you guys think those are appropriate. And if you give me one other thing, if possible, you mentioned the right turn thing. I'm just thinking outside the box, whenever we can make a project better. One thing that I'm maybe on that line of thinking of, that's something the planning commission wanted to condition. And if obviously the town engineer agrees and allows it, we could at the first entrance into the project from Brockway, we could add a slightly raised finger island that basically pushes it to the right with a right turn only sign. And that would basically suggest to the majority of the people that might live there in the future to go right instead of through their development. So I'm not opposed to that if that's something you want to add as well. So.
Yes. The signage on the Silver Creek is not subject to town review and approval?
On the private property?
Correct.
If it falls under, I mean, signage, even though it's a private road, signage, private property, we have rules for signage in the town. But many of the kind of smaller directional signage is under the square footage that we wouldn't have to review. So I would imagine that, private property, no parking, et cetera, would be something that they could add. The finger island, I would just bring up that fire would need to approve any kind of adjustment to egress or ingress.
That's a nice concession, I think.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting.
I'd also think the right turn only, I just, when you guys were talking about that, we don't know what the determination of legal access is at the moment, so they could have legal access to all the roads or the full roadway.
Right. But if we were to put it as a condition of approval, it would be assuming or conditioned upon whatever legal agreement is created for access to Silver Creek over Winter Creek from Brockway Road. would allow a right turn only sign from both exits. Not
Only
just
if a legal agreement is required. It may,
well,
they
a
may
legal
already
agreement
have.
is required for them to access.
They need to demonstrate that they have legal access. That could be a court decision, it could be an agreement with the HOA. I
Right.
forget what the other thing in 28 was.
So if I'm making the assumption that whatever that agreement is going to be from the second Silver Creek entrance east to Brockway Road.
I think that's the point. We don't know what that is, and so we could assume it would still be the town engineer's determination on what signage was allowed out there. And just for reference, the general plan, one of the design elements for that is enhancing connections and connectivity within and between the various parts of the community. And so putting up again arbitrary signs about right turn only,
but it's private property. It's a different scenario.
While satisfying one group is potentially going against kind of direction or from the general plan. So again, ultimately, town engineer's determination.
It's still private property. I know we seem to be forgetting that, but it's still private property.
It is, but it was also a project that was approved by the town with improvement plans that were
All private property is
were
approved
approved
by the
by the town engineer. So
every house I built was built on private property that was allowed by the town of Truckee. You're correct.
You are also correct.
But I think the encroachment from the private property to the main road is part of the issue. And so directional, how you would leave that encroachment to the main road could be up for the town engineer's decision.
And the fire marshal.
Oh, yeah, well, and then of course, I don't know where fire would go with whether or not the residents are only allowed to exit one way or another. That would be something we would have to explore with the fire district.
So when we write up our condition of approval, if this gets approved, then that's the direction we'll go.
I think we take Martin's suggestion.
And take Martin's suggestion, yeah.
Not even a sign, it's a piece of asphalt, basically.
It has to be designed well. I just drove over a corner in a town on a very poorly designed bit of traffic calming.
These guys have the best civil engineer around.
Yeah, that was an SCO project that you were on.
Okay, so Coral, you came up with a couple of conditions of approval of this, and then I want to go through and see if we're going to approve this or not. So
All right, so condition of approval, the simple one first.
These are ones that we're going to be adding. All right.
Yeah, so I am not spitting out direct verbiage because that's not the way I write, but the maintaining the bike path. The contractors need to figure out how to the developer needs to maintain the bike path during construction. If that's just completely infeasible, there should be we say minimize the length of closure time or, through signage, a bike path detour. I mean, share the road signs aren't the greatest for cyclists, but yeah, exactly. Bike path, on-site management, if that is something that is not required by state law. We should recommend that the residents of the Winter Creek area adopt a towing plan, a program. And we should maybe perhaps recommend that
I don't agree
they
with
add
that.
some
That's their
signage
business if they wanted
regarding
to.
parking. Oh, that's true.
So
We
why
can
would we-
recommend it. We can recommend that they put up.
seeing anything about their project. This is adjacent park.
Right.
Excuse me. You know, I don't think we can recommend that they do something. This is an existing
Good
development
point.
that we're not reviewing.
Fair enough.
Toll booths?
There you go. Somebody go back to town and get some dimes. Okay.
So just since, if you don't mind the bike, I think speaking with Scott, we could add the bicycle language to the existing condition 25 that speaks to the public trail, the proposed improvements. We can say that it would always need to be, the bike path would also need to be maintained at that time. Does that?
Weather conditions permitting. I mean, I assume that's understood.
I mean, is
When
like
it's under 8 feet of
maintained?
snow.
Or is it like open/access during construction? Like both?
Open.
Yeah. Because we want
I don't
people to
think
be able
it's-
to
they don't
utilize
have to-
the
don't have
bike
to-
path, but
it's not
their
plowed in the winter.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. Maintained. What do you think is the right word there?
Typically, it'd be continue to provide access through the project site during construction.
Okay.
On the trail, something along those lines.
And then contractor parking is another one. Because at least we can condition that.
All right, so contractor parking, what?
Require
It's required to be on
a
site.
parking plan, contractor parking has to be on site. Construction parking.
And I think
And any
like
staging,
equipment
I don't know if
staging.
you need to include that word too. Is that unreasonable? Is it feasible?
I mean, I think the parking, it could be a combination of either on-site or another appropriate location within the public right-of-way.
So maybe we add the plan, construction parking plan.
Does the town want to review a construction parking plan for this project before approval?
I don't think it's necessary. I think that if you just stated that it either needs to be located on the private property or in the public right-of-way where allowed, I think that covers it.
Does that work for you? That Scott's got it, I think.
That works for me.
Okay.
So, Sammy, you okay with that?
What else do you got?
Well, we
You got
need
the
to
safety
confirm
plan
that
for the
on
mailboxes?
the mailbox is here. Safety plan to protect the existing mailboxes on the association property and adjacent to parcel B.
I'm not sure I understand what what might happen to the mailboxes.
Yeah, so the mailboxes are on the west side of Winter Creek, and the project's on the east side.
And I believe they have a pullout to like park and get the mail out, so I'm not sure that it really would be interacting with Silver Creek.
Adjacent.
Where do you see that?
That is right. That is how the mailboxes are. It's just number 4 from this comment we got from.
Oh, there. Those right there. That's well, isn't that part of the street also maintained by the HOA? So why should that be a condition for the construction of this site if it's already done by the HOA? I don't understand. So I can't get behind that one necessarily. And the on-site management, if we're not 100% sure we need to just figure out whether that's a state law or not. And if it's not, let's require on-site management.
I did find this. I don't know, it's not big enough. It does appear that in 2023, a manager, janitor, housekeeper, or other responsible person shall reside upon the premises.
Okay, then we don't need to condition that.
Good job.
Do we have any recommendations? The others we can't recommend anything to the HOA. Do we have any recommendations to anybody else?
I mean, what about what Martin suggested about the right turn directional curb situation? As long as it would, the fire marshal would be okay with it.
Consider directional signage appropriate to legal access for
Yes.
Silver Creek?
I think there's also some paving. right?
And his, what'd you call that corner?
Direction.
A raised finger island, a raised directional finger island, if
And
allowed
or-
by the town engineer and/or fire department.
Okay, as
That's
I
some
said,
fancy-
I
that's some
drove.
fancy lexicon right
I
there.
did. I just drove
why I didn't
over one of
remember it.
those because it wasn't very visible, and it is invisible during the snow. So I've heard reports of being driven. This is
Sean,
not in
call it
Truckee.
directional, raised directional.
Raised directional finger island. Oh, it's not gonna. Raised.
Consider. Is it a condition if we're considering saying consider it, or are we? Is that a recommendation? Just so I understand what it is.
Well, I guess my concern is first we have to figure out access, and then we need other agencies to make sure that it's legal. So if someone wants to come up with a better word, that's not.
Consider is still a viable word to use in one of your conditions. So
Okay.
And then I think you also wanted to add in there for the town engineer and Truckee Fire upon their review and approval.
Probably maintenance should be in there too, right? Because those islands get screwed up by plows and stuff.
It would be on Silver Creek's property, so
It's up to them to maintain.
I think they would have to maintain it. Okay. Consider directional signage and/or raised directional finger island dependent on legal access. Determination to be reviewed by Truckee Fire Protection Nursing and town
Should we make it
engineer.
painfully clear that we're talking about directional signage for a right turn from the project exit, the northern project exit? Or do we want to be that specific?
Maybe, I mean, I think dependent on legal access, I feel like we're saying directional signage to direct to the legal access point.
Right. I think it's fine.
But it is up to you guys, so if you'd like more.
Well,
I'm fine with
directional
it.
signage could point either direction.
Well,
I
we're
just-
not sure of the legal, I mean, that my thought is if legal access is provided through, I mean, in case it is to Palisades and, you know, if it's through access, then
Why in God's name would they put in a left turn only sign?
well, if it was allowed, if they have legal access both ways, why would you put in a right turn only sign?
If they have legal access, I think we would just want to, I think the idea is
If
to
there's legal access all the way
encourage.
through Winter Creek Road, you're saying, right? Winter Creek Loop?
Yes.
And staff
Yeah.
not
gonna
thinks
happen.
that they probably do have legal access already. So it's not necessarily to prevent, it's to encourage the right turn. Not necessarily to prevent. If they have legal access, we can't prevent the left turn. But we can encourage the right
You
turn.
can't physically prevent it with a sign either.
No.
It feels odd to me to not to have, I mean, and this isn't my condition, but to encourage people not to use their legal access if they have it, but that might be more of a legalese thing than
Then leave it.
than my feelings.
Just leave it. That's fine then. It's something.
Any other conditions from any of the commissioners? Sammy?
I think that's everything. Hold on one second.
Dave? Dan? Coral?
No.
All right, well, then the discussion now becomes, do we approve it or deny it?
I'll make a motion.
Go ahead.
with the language, because I think we're there. I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 2024-08, approving the following actions based on the recommended findings and subject to the recommended conditions of approval. Determine the project exempt from CEQA, approve the development permit, and the other items we just listed.
I need a second, please.
I'll second.
Further discussion. I'll say that as much as I think there's way too many units on this small piece of property, I feel my hands are tied. I have a history of doing architectural standards for Tower Donner for 25 years and doing this now for a year and a half. And my decisions aren't really my personal feelings. My decisions are based on what the law requires from people and from developers and from projects. And the STBL law, as much as I don't like it, is being followed by this project, unfortunately. So, and I can't seem to make a finding to think otherwise. That's all I've got to say.
I feel similarly. It's not perfect. It's not perfect, and there are things included in the SBDL that make it very difficult to go, hooray, more
Yeah.
housing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a project I love. I don't like the 3-story,
I think that staging it up is helping.
but it does check the boxes and meet the rules.
And that's, I don't know if I can say this. I can, it's a test. This is,
Well, folks, if you don't like what the state laws are, then you need to go to the state or probably vote out your existing legislature. Can't help you with that. What was that?
we would have to make a finding that it's not.
And I can't make that finding. Can anybody make that finding?
I mean, I think the traffic study's flawed. And I hate the fact that we have an abusive parent telling us what to do. You know, the fools in Sacramento making these laws. It's just, it sucks.
Thank you. Kaylee?
Chair Claren,
Yes.
Vice Chair Gove,
No.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Taylor,
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yes.
There you have it, folks. What's the appeal process? Not surprised.
I do want to add, if you are going to appeal, like, please feel free to work with me to get your appeal in and get everything settled before that date.
Not really. All right, thank you. You're all dismissed. I can't. Call me after.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Chair Claren, if you're interested in taking a break, this might be a good opportunity for that. Otherwise, you could proceed forward with the next agenda
I think
item.
we should take a 5-minute break. Thank you. And we're back. All right. Public hearings, minor review, item 7.1, planning application 2024-87, Industrial Way Mixed Use Project Amendment. Staff presentation, Laura Dabe.
All right, good evening, everyone. This is a minor item, so I will try to be quick here. What we are here to talk about tonight are some amendments that are requested by the applicant to the Industrial Way Mixed-Use Project, which was approved in May 2020. You can see here there were 2 industrial buildings and then a multifamily building in the corner there. The project has been constructed at this point. With the original approval, there were about 28,000 square feet of industrial space in the 2 buildings, and the applicant was granted a 0.04 FAR increase that was allowed for the mixed-use project and granted by the Planning Commission. This is where the project is located. It's in the manufacturing zone. The land use designation is industrial, and it's to the north of Pioneer Commerce Center. We don't have to go through all of these. Essentially, we had the original project approval, then a time extension, and some other entitlements, including a tentative map and parcel map to subdivide the property, and a zoning clearance to establish uses within the spaces. As I mentioned, the building permits were completed. That was in April, and CEVA was issued. These are just the plans from the original entitlement, showing the site plan and the industrial buildings. So what the applicant is asking for tonight is approval of an additional FAR increase of 0.05 to construct about 5,800 square feet of mezzanine space within the existing units and 5 additional parking spaces. This is the site plan that they're proposing. You can see the additional parking is here on the side. So when the project was originally approved, the developer was anticipating that in the future there could be interest in having mezzanine spaces. At that time, we could have done that through a building permit, as long as it fell within the 10% change that the community development director could approve at the staff level. So it would have been an easier process, but the development code definition changed in 2023 and includes mezzanines now. So with the original approval, mezzanines weren't specifically included in the project description, but there was one plan sheet that showed a couple of conceptual mezzanine spaces in 4 of the tenant spaces. So the community development director was comfortable allowing those 4 mezzanines to be constructed under the original approval while we worked through the project amendment process. So tonight, what's requested is the project amendment. Since the Planning Commission was the original review authority, you're also the authority for any major changes to the project. We looked at general plan consistency. We have a different general plan now than when the project and time extension were approved. 2 of the things that changed in that time were the maximum amount of floor area ratio that's allowed. It was 0.20 and now it's 0.25 in that land use designation. And then how the FAR is calculated, which now includes residential and non-residential. So originally, there was the 0.2 and the 0.04 increase, which resulted in 0.24 FAR, but if you recalculate it under the new standard, it comes out to 0.29 FAR for the existing. We also looked at other policies in the plan related to industrial uses and determined that the project is consistent, not only with those policies, but also overall with the general plan. When the project was approved, this was a table that showed the areas of consistency. There were a couple items, the floor area ratio and the parking required Planning Commission approval to modify those standards, and those modifications were approved. Since that time, we've had some amendments to the development code, so we went back and looked at the project under those standards. We haven't updated the gross floor area definition and FAR standards yet in the development code, so we're deferring to the general plan on those. Floor area ratio criteria, it allows up to 0.05 increase per project feature for projects in this zone. And one of those project features is providing public art valued at 1% of the development costs. That's what the applicant is asking for tonight. In terms of parking, there were 53 spaces required and 54 were constructed. The generation for the mezzanines would be 6, but since there's a surplus space, that comes up to 5 additional required. Bike parking, when you calculate that based on the total amount of parking, it comes out to 1 additional space. We also went back and looked at the workforce housing requirements and determined that no additional would be generated by this change. So in terms of the FAR increase, there's a few findings that need to be made, which we believe can be made in this case. As I mentioned, the public art fee is what the applicant is requesting. The 1% of development costs would come out to a fee of $59,000 approximately, and that would go towards public art in Truckee with input from the Public Arts Commission. So as I mentioned, the current FAR is 0.29 under the current general plan standards, so with the increase it would come out to 0.34. One of the things the applicant had asked for was a phasing plan for the additional parking construction to build a couple of the spaces at the beginning and then defer construction of some of the other spaces till later. Staff's recommendation is to go with our standard time limits and timeframes for conditions to be met, which would be to require the parking to be constructed up front because that's being essentially granted the benefit of the additional FAR. So we think that that's the current precedent and would be much easier from a logistical standpoint. So with incorporation of the recommended conditions of approval, we think the project is consistent with the development code. The recommended CEQA exemption is 15301, which is existing facilities. That applies to projects that don't have any expansion of the former use beyond something that's negligible. Our recommendation tonight would be to adopt Resolution 2024-11, determining the project exempt from CEQA and approving the amendments to grant the additional FAR increase of 0.05, allowing construction of up to 5,837 square feet of additional mezzanine floor area within the two buildings and construction of 5 additional parking spaces subject to the recommended conditions of approval. You could choose to take an alternate action tonight, which could include continuing the hearing. You could find that the CEQA exemption is not suitable. You could modify the conditions of approval. You could approve the project amendment with those modifications, or you could deny it if you don't think that the required findings can be made. So if you take action tonight, the appeal period ends on August 30th at 5 p.m. And I could take any questions. We also have the applicant here, Blair Porteous. I believe he wanted to say a few words.
Sure.
Thanks very much. Blair Porteous, I am the applicant. I am the managing member of Truckee Industrial Way, LLC, the owner of the property. I think Laura has concisely, described kind of the project of where we started in 2020, the COVID, trying to get building permits when everybody else was trying to get building permits, and then the malware, which happened with the town of Truckee. We've had a couple of little staggers along the way, and we've worked very well with the town of Truckee. The thing that we've kind of all along the way, from the Planning Commission meeting back in 2020 to our building permits that were issued in 2022, there was always the intent for mezzanines. They're drawn on the plans. They're actually documented on our building permits. And so it kind of came as a surprise in May of this year when we submitted for a building permit for a mezzanine, that there wasn't any mezzanine space left, right? There wasn't any square foot available for mezzanine space. And that's because of a code change that happened in the general plan in, I think, October of 2023, that obviously that Laura just said is not yet implemented into the development code. And that's why I'm here today, because we worked with Laura on trying to find a solution to trying to get some space for the mezzanine, and this is the path forward, and I understand that. I think for us, it's difficult because we thought we had this right, and prior to October of this year, mezzanine space was not counted towards your FAR, and now it is. And these are for there's buyers who are buying this property, and we were under the understanding that there was mezzanine, and now we're looking for a path for them to be able to get the mezzanine. And that's where we are today, and I hope you move forward. I do have a comment about one of the conditions of approval. This is the previous conversation that we had. we thought we had a vested right. Obviously, we don't. The code changes. We weren't informed of the code changing, right? We were the only mezzanine-oriented development warehouse project in Truckee. And, this is our path now. We understand it. We're going to have to go forward. But what we're trying to do is get mezzanine space for the owners of these units, which are basically local business owners in the town of Truckee who are buying these units. And then right now, under the condition 2B, I think it is, there's a timeline at which this square footage would expire. So that if an owner buys a space and doesn't build a mezzanine within the timeline, that right goes away because the code says it does. And I would I think our hands are tied to some degree, and Danielle and Laura will kind of talk to you about this, but our goal is to, try to get this right back to the builder, to the buyers of this. And then I had one other comment about the bike parking. I think on the conditions of approval, it says 11, but on the requirements, it's 9. So I think we need to add 1 as opposed to 3. That's my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Coral?
So how much bike parking is required?
So 8 spaces were required. When I went back and looked at the time extension application, we recalculated it at that point, and then 9 would be currently required for the manufacturing. There's additional bike parking required for the residential use, so that might be, the condition covers all of that, so it's a little confusing, I think, but it's 1 additional space.
Okay, so it's just 1 in addition to what's already there?
Yeah.
Is that what the approval says?
The condition?
So it talks about the total amount of parking that's required. So we could clarify, maybe it would help to add some language to this that talks about the 1 additional space being required.
Okay, so
I could reword this to make that more clear.
okay. 2 other quick questions. Precedent, the next 2 questions are related to precedent. Is there any reason that the staff feels that this might set a bad precedent? It just doesn't seem really complicated or, to me.
The parking you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about just the increase in floor area ratio, which appears to be completely within code, so I don't think there's any question there. I guess the parking phasing, I can see why you don't want to phase that. I agree that would set a bad precedent as well. And you don't want to have to develop any new programs or processes. Please, no more, right? So that's really all I had. It seems straightforward.
Go ahead.
Do we need any of these conditions of approval?
Can we pull them up?
Yeah, do we actually need any of them?
Well, we have to amend the previous approval through the project amendment. So I only focused on the ones that would change, which is the timeframes, the parking, the bike parking, the payment of the public art fee that's required. I didn't go back and redo all of the conditions. I only focused on the ones that would change as part of this.
Did you get my edit on page 1?
Yes.
Okay.
I already fixed that. There was a typo that Coral
But
pointed
I
out.
see every one of these says planning division recommendation, right?
Yeah, that's how we always identify those, unless it's an agency requirement or an engineering requirement.
And for reference to, once the resolutions are signed by the chair, like that version the chair signs, we take off the recommendation wording. So you just know whose condition it was. It'll say planning division condition, PUD condition, whatever it is. But for the draft resolutions, we show it as a recommendation.
Yeah, so I'll ask the question again. Are any of these actually necessary? I mean, you had a project, you had mezzanines.
Well, the mezzanines were not included in the original project. They weren't in the description, they weren't discussed in the staff report, and they weren't considered by the commission. There was 1 sheet of the overall plan set, of which there are many sheets, that showed some sort of future conceptual designs in 4 of the tenant spaces. It didn't show 5,800 square feet of additional mezzanine space, which is what's being asked for tonight.
I would say it sounds like confusion because the applicant sure thought he had that.
I think it was a non-issue at the time because at the time it didn't count towards your floor area and you could have just done it through a building permit.
I'm going to guess he was assuming he'd sell them and it would be the new owner's right to use them. Is that correct?
Correct, and it's also on the, correct, and it's also on the building permit that said mezzanines are available to every unit.
It said future mezzanines, which.
It doesn't say future.
Well, there was some language on there. It was not approved as part of the building permit.
I mean, he's already paying $60,000 for public art. Is awesome. Do we need to add more conditions so that they can have, I mean, even like the bike parking, I mean, aren't people going to park their bikes?
You have
inside their-
discretion over the bike parking. You could determine that the amount of bike parking, there is code language that says if you think that there's sufficient bike parking already, you could waive that if you like.
Can't waive the art fee?
No, because there needs to be a benefit that is associated with the additional FAR that's being granted. And the
Having
parking-
local businesses having a place to do their business isn't a benefit?
There are specific benefits that are listed in the development code. I believe there's 9 different ones, and it has to be one of those. This was the only one that qualified for this project.
How did the 5,800 square feet get calculated? Whose number was that?
That was the applicant's number.
That's 5,800 square feet is enough?
That's based on the max that I could. That's based on the max that we could ask for because it's a 5% bonus.
Got it.
It is still less than the building code allowable mezzanine space.
I think it's nice you asked to do this, and do it.
There is that, yeah.
We think alike.
I mean,
That's what I was thinking.
I mean,
these do require building permits. We are in the process for 2 of them right now. I believe one of them's been completed, the other one's in plan check. So this is something that does require building permits.
fair enough. Can you give me, Laura, the bare bones conditions of approval that would,
Well, the bare bones are the ones that I listed here. There's only, I believe, one.
but the bike parking you said we don't need?
The
to
bike
do, right?
parking, if you feel that there's sufficient bike parking currently, then
car
you
parking?
could waive the additional 1 space. The parking standard is a development code standard, so the only way to waive that would be to do a planned development or,
I think
which is a different process.
The bike parking requirements associated with the warehouse seem rather moot to me because you're going to
You're gonna
ride
park
it into the
inside
warehouse.
the
However,
warehouse.
there are also residences here, so I think we need to
But we're
keep,
not changing the number of residences, right?
if we just, as long as we're not changing how many are required for the residences, I would be okay with eliminating the bike parking
What else can we-
requirements for the warehouse.
What else can we get rid of? He's got to pay the $60,000 for the art.
We like
Where's the
art.
art going to go?
What
We don't
is
know
the
yet,
art?
Wherever the art committee
Yeah.
decides.
Correct.
why did the mezzanines get lumped into, get added to the floor area ratio? I talked to somebody that was interested in putting one of their businesses into one of these buildings, but they had a CNC machine that literally took up the whole floor space that was operated by one person. and they needed a whole second layer of mezzanine to make the deal work. How did we, when we added the mezzanines to the FAR in the development code, what was the thought process behind that?
Well, there's a lot of different types of mezzanines that we're seeing come through. There's, Rayleigh's was technically had a mezzanine, which is where their, upstairs area is. I've seen restaurants wanting to do it so they have second floor space. And if it meets the building code, which is, 1/3 of the underlying floor area is the maximum it can be, and then it has to meet some other criteria for wall heights and things like that. It's adding usable space, and in some cases it could be, patron space and things like that. It's not always something that's, storage or something like that.
It triggers some other requirements.
Right.
Can we just
So
go
you
back
have
and
to
forth
keep
this
track of it.
applicant questions? Yeah. I had an applicant question.
You got a question for the applicant?
Yeah, I was curious, are you planning to do the same mezzanines in each unit, or could some have a really big mezzanine, and some have?
Well, the building code has a very clear definition of mezzanine, right? And in the building code, you can only do 20% of the lower floor area. Further, in the building code, it clearly states that space above in the mezzanine is not counted towards floor area. The Truckee Development Code that was changed in October 2023 supersedes that now, and therefore now has to be counted towards floor area. Right now, if this is approved and we have 5,800 square feet, the intent is to give it evenly to the 20 buyers of these space. So that gives them roughly 360 square feet. Yeah.
Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Thank you. Sammy?
I'm fine with removing the bike parking spot to
Are you?
kind of help streamline this.
Thank you. David?
I see no reason why I see no reason not to approve this.
Thank you. Then, is there any other discussion? Can I have a motion?
I move that we approve Resolution 2024-11, the Industrial Way Mixed-Use Project Amendment.
I need a second.
Second.
Further discussion. Blair said requested the parking to be changed. Anybody
sorry.
have any comments on that?
Doesn't make a difference. Why would you want to split it up?
So there's two things at play here. We're running up against the winter, right? The condition of having the 5 parking spaces means I have to get 5 parking spaces done in less than 30 days. I have to get it permitted and through the process, and I have to build it in 30 days. Otherwise, I can't give any mezzanines to anyone until sometime next year, which is already an impediment given the fact that I only, was informed of this change in May of this year, and I just haven't had I don't have the time to do that. And then secondarily, with the clause 2B, which I would like to be stricken, is that we're paying $60,000 for the right for mezzanines, but that mezzanine right expires in, somewhere between 2 to 6 years. And I would like it to be a vested right so that the buyers of these units, the people of the town of Truckee, the builders and that are buying them have that right for the future, not that it expires in 6 years.
100%.
Me too.
If we're approving an increase in floor area ratio, isn't that kind of a vested?
Yeah, why would it expire?
approval? Why would does that expire, or does the land use?
So there is some language in the development code that talks about when the permit expires. And, sorry, it's not up on the screen. So it talks about all of the improvements essentially needing to be constructed prior to expiration. So our standard timeframes are you have to exercise a permit within 2 years and complete the work within 4 unless you apply for a time extension. So that includes, it says, all the features of the project as shown on the approved permit shall be completed. So he would have 4 years to complete it, could come in for the time extension. If that runs out, then we'll just need to get it re-entitled.
But you're not doing it, right? The owners are. 4 years, the code's going to change it.
Maybe it goes back.
Can we get rid of that?
This is a development code standard, so no.
And I'll. Ooh, sorry, it is my. Sorry.
Were you going to talk about the bond?
No, I mean, an alternative option is that he could request a phasing schedule that's different than this, but that would require coming back with a different noticed project. And he would need to provide what he wants to do for phasing, and then we would need to evaluate it and make sure it's consistent with the code. But that is an option. And it would likely be a couple months because the next
Right.
couple months are already
I
booked.
don't think that's an option, really. How about the parking thing?
Yeah, can we change that so he doesn't have to do the parking first?
So Danielle suggested that we could do a bond for the parking so that it wouldn't hold up his ability to move forward with mezzanines over the winter when there's no site disturbance allowed.
You've already got that process nailed down.
What's that look like?
It's just basically an insurance policy, right?
Yeah, but how much are we talking?
It's what, 125% of the materials and labor.
5 parking spots?
And then
Well,
we
it's a
essentially
bond
just
in the
hold that.
value of, so if
That's
it's,
the bond.
Right.
Yeah, it's not the actual amount.
yeah. yeah.
Right, exactly. And it can be a security, or we have other options too.
Yeah, we
How
can.
does the applicant feel about that?
You know, as an applicant and a developer, my hands are kind of tied. So I'd be thankful for the opportunity to give this space to the buyers now. So the answer is yes.
So,
The
yeah.
hardest part for me is the expiration of the right.
Sounds like we can't do anything with
Yeah, and I don't know if question for staff, how many years can that be extended?
So a
2 at a
time
time.
extension is typically 2 years. That's the standard. We'd have to look at the time limits on the phasing plan. I think those are also 6 years total, but we'd have to go back and check.
It's unspecified, but would need to be detailed in a proposal that you would consider at a future date if you wanted to.
Which this is kind of an unusual circumstance, but I think I've not really seen anything go beyond 10 years, and that was for a pretty complicated, I mean, that was like Pioneer Commerce Center. It was a huge project.
What was your comment, though, about doing 2 spots now and 3 spots later?
The rationale behind that is there's 2 spots that are pretty easy to do, and I could do that timely, and that would give me, up to an extra, I think 3,000 or 4,000 square feet on the ratio. So it allowed me to put more people into mezzanine sooner.
Just
So we do that instead of the bond,
require
like,
the
do
2
spots?
Well, no, we still have to ensure that the others are going to go.
Well, he can't do more, he can do 2 spots now.
Just say the bond, and then if he does 2 spots, then he's got to do a bond on 3. If he doesn't do the 2 spots, then he does a bond on 5. Just say he needs a bond and let him decide which spots he wants to do it on. Does that work? Can we do that?
I think that's fine, and we can, I mean, I wouldn't just say bond, so we have other options, so we'll use our typical language that we have for that,
Yes.
so security and equivalent.
Right.
I mean, the bond does have a time frame of when it would need to be completed, so it would buy him some extra time, but we would still need it to be done.
That depends
probably
on the
next-
security you use, too.
Yes,
Because I've used security that was property, so it went
Yes.
forever.
that's an option too.
Right. Okay, so with that verbiage in there, which is the security for the parking spots, I need a motion.
We made a
We
motion.
made a
second.
motion and it was
Oh,
seconded.
we've been in discussion, right? Call, please.
No, we usually discuss.
Chair Claren,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gove,
yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Taylor,
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yes.
You didn't actually include this in your motion, but you did want to strike the bike parking? Okay. And we're not going to specifically add language about the bond because that's already something that's allowed, right? Okay.
Why don't you do a motion to amend it as Laura just explained, so we have that clear in the record?
I'd like to make a motion to amend.
I'll second that.
Amended, as Laura just explained. That's the verbiage.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to amend as Laura just explained.
Remove the bike parking.
That's clear. That's clear.
That time.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Moving right along. Sure, if you want to. Yeah, that's fine. All right, Chantal and I are going to tag team this presentation. All right, so tonight we're talking about general plan implementation with development code updates. So Chantal wants to get this party started. She really wanted me to say that. So with the new general plan, we have a lot of changes that we need to make in the development code. We've spent a lot of time thinking through
I know.
She-
I kind of wanted to say it.
I was looking for some comment about the Beatles and that crosswalk, but I couldn't come up with any.
Did you
I
like
love
that?
Thank you. I'm a
You're
Beatles
welcome.
fanatic, so that was awesome. Like the most famous crosswalk in the world.
So tonight, what we're talking about are a couple new zone districts that we're proposing to add to the code to implement some of the land use designations, and then a bunch of cleanup items. And what we're just doing tonight is kind of an overview, giving you a chance to ask questions and give us feedback, since this is the first. It's a little different than our normal development code updates. And we have a lot more that we'll be bringing to you. This is just the first sort of chunk of this. So tonight, we're going to talk about corridor mixed use, neighborhood mixed use, how we are proposing to deal with existing development, and then cleanups. So some background, we had the Innovate Gateway strategy, which came up with some recommendations for the Gateway area. Included changing the commercial zoning to mixed use to add some greater flexibility for housing, and some other improvements to that area. When the general plan was adopted, it incorporated some of that vision. So we have corridor mixed use throughout Gateway. We've got neighborhood mixed use in a couple different areas of town, and then a bunch of different policies related to mixed use development. With corridor mixed use, like I said, that's in the Gateway area. It allows a range of uses, including multifamily, a bunch of commercial uses. It has some requirements for how buildings are oriented to the street, allows vertical and horizontal mixed use, and prohibits standalone residential. It allows 12 to 24 dwelling units per acre, except there is one part of the area where it's 6 to 18, and then there's some provisions for density bonuses through a town density bonus program, which we're currently working on creating. And then the FAR is 1.0 is the base FAR, with potentially increases to that with the density bonus program. So the pink, dark pink, is the areas that would be now corridor mixed use. And then neighborhood mixed use is really neighborhood-oriented commercial uses like restaurants, office, retail, and multifamily. It also allows horizontal mixed use, and it's really supposed to be uses that support neighborhoods. The dwelling unit or density is 6 to 8 dwelling units per acre, and the FAR is 0.6 for the base FAR. Again, with some possibility of increasing that with the density bonus. Those areas are these areas at Donner Lake that are circled in red, and then an area in Glenshire. So now I'm going to turn it over to Chantal to get into a little more detail.
Sure. So this next part is going to be more about how we came about with these suggestions for the land use tables and the development standards. But first off, I thought we should discuss what is mixed use, because these new zone districts require it. So our development code defines it as properties which have various uses, such as office, commercial, institutional, residential. These can be combined in a single building or on a single site, and they're kind of an integrated development project. So using that definition, I almost, Laura, slide. We started in with corridor mixed use. And with corridor mixed use, what we thought about is what was the former zoning. So the former zoning was mostly general commercial and some highway commercial. So really more intensive commercial uses. Are all of the uses that were formerly allowed, are they compatible now that we want to look into adding residential? If they are compatible, do they need a higher level of review to ensure compatibility? Do we want to just rubber stamp something? Should they go to the zoning administrator? Should there be a different kind of lens on it now that we're looking at the potential of adding more residential units? We need to make sure that it's consistent with our land use designation, as Laura mentioned, and corridor mixed use land use designation. They already kind of built in some development standards, so where the building should be oriented, where the parking goes. So we need to make sure that's in the zone district. And really, we see the intent of corridor mixed use is to allow flexibility and really add some additional residential units and something that is more traditionally commercial. So you might see in our two zone districts, we have a lower requirement for commercial versus residential than we do with our next, with neighborhood mixed use. With neighborhood mixed use, these are really our commercial neighborhood nodes that are existing, and you saw a lot of it in Donner Lake and some in Glenshire. These properties directly abut residential uses, so we wanted to think about the compatibility, kind of think stronger about the compatibility of uses and the scale of development going next to existing residential neighborhoods. Once again, we wanted to look at the land use designation, making sure that the uses that are allowable are neighborhood serving, just as the general plan requires. Another delve into the level of review required for permitting uses in this. And the intent here is to really still maintain our neighborhood commercial uses, because we're looking to have mixed use centers where commercial and other uses are available to our residents. So we are looking for a little more of a commercial to residential ratio when looking at a mix of uses there. And then we also had to think about some of the neighborhood mixed use land use designation actually goes over previous residential land uses, so some residential zoning. So we kind of tweaked the idea for NMU when it comes to residential properties on Donner Lake. These properties are generally smaller. They have some specific development standards, not allowing setback exceptions, having a stricter FAR. So we kind of toned down the requirements for the mixed use requirements there.
Most of the mixed use now, you can't just do one or the other. You have to do both, right?
Yes. So mixed use being there's got to be another use of some sort.
Because did it used to be you could be either like a commercial or a residential if that's what the mixed use was? It could be one or the other. Now it has to be both.
I'm not sure. So prior to being mixed use, you could do commercial, you could do mixed use, or you could do standalone residential. So that was removed out.
No, I mean, if in what was like DMU, downtown mixed use, right? You could be a residential or a commercial. Now you have to have both uses.
Not in DMU. DMU, that's not changing. You can still do standalone residential there because that's allowed currently into the zoning.
And that's not changing.
And we're not changing DMU.
Then the other MUs, NMU,
the new MUs, yeah.
Those you have to have both uses within.
Yeah, and that doesn't have to be commercial and residential. It could be two different types of commercial uses within the same building.
Okay.
And that's because the land use, the general plan has changed that rule, so we're just reflecting it down. The general plan did not, or the downtown Truckee plan didn't change that downtown mixed use area. So one of the things, when we were looking at this is how do we balance existing development? There are plenty of existing developed properties along Donner Pass Road that already have uses established that, may want to come in and maybe, slightly expand their use. And does that mean they automatically need to add another use or add residential or, move their parking to the back or, et cetera. So we wanted to balance implementing the general plan, because that's the vision for the future that was adopted by town council, with also not hamstringing these already current, business owners and currently developed properties. The non-conforming use chapter allows a little bit of wiggle room, but it wouldn't allow something like expanding your use, because that would be intensifying the site. So we looked into, next. I'm doing it on my computer, and of course it's not moving up there. So this was our proposal in handling that is doing a 50% increase would trigger needing to, come up to your new general plan land use designation, your new zoning, but a smaller increase in floor area would allow you to maintain what you kind of already have going on. So we thought, we found that an interesting problem. We would love to hear feedback from the Planning Commission, thoughts on how we handled it or how you would think of handling it. And then, we have a myriad of cleanup amendments. We have slides. We can go over those if you guys have questions, but we really wanted to next start the discussion on, what you thought of the new zone districts, the uses and development standards, how we're handling nonconformity. And, our direction on creating these new zoning districts to be consistent with the general plan.
So that's it. So we're asking for your feedback and giving you a chance to ask questions. And then what we'll do is take that back, incorporate it, and then we'll actually bring you something to take action on at a future meeting.
So are you going to start With one in particular, one specific?
I mean, I think we are kind of wondering how the commission felt. We could start with one of the zone districts. We could start with corridor mixed use. I mean, that's brand new. Are there, questions about the uses? Does it seem reasonable? How do you, what do you think of this new zoning district and how it aligns with our land use designation?
So it was formerly zoned either CG or CH. What is that?
General commercial or highway commercial. And Laura, maybe you could bring up the map again. It's basically Donner Pass Road in the Gateway District, and then coming
Right.
down towards Deerfield off the highway. So it's dark pink areas.
Yeah, I noticed this before. So the blue in public, is that where the PUD building is?
That's a high school and the district offices and the
No, across the street.
oh, there.
But does this apply to all CH zones? 'Cause you're not- you don't
It's
have
got to
them
be
on here.
TDPUD.
This applies to where you see
guess, right?
where you see that dark pink.
But all CH parcels in Truckee?
No.
No. As you know, there's another CH parcel out by Coldstream, and that is not part of the corridor mixed use.
Why not?
Because it wasn't designated that way by the general plan. That's something that we're going to talk about as a future round of this to figure out what the right zoning for that would be.
If you think about it, so that property is still zoned, I believe the land use designation is commercial. So if you're thinking the overarching land use designation is commercial, and then the highway commercial is the zoning district, so it's still consistent with itself. These properties are far from consistent with their underlining zoning, which is why we're creating these zoning districts to match what the general plan changed.
Also, I think our expectation isn't that you would have all the answers of things that you're curious about or know right now. We wanted to get, this is sort of a trial on our part to get this in front of you so that you have some time to think about it also. So you can ask us questions, but maybe something will dawn on you after this meeting, and that's okay too. We'll still take your comments afterwards also to incorporate, but we just knew it was a lot to absorb at one time, and we didn't want to give you the added pressure of making a recommendation without having seen this first since it's so new.
So
Were there,
Go ahead.
I guess we're all
Coral,
got
go
a
ahead,
question.
Coral.
Okay. Were there any other MUs contemplated besides these three?
Yeah, there's also riverfront mixed use, but that area of town is going through the R2SC process right now. So we're waiting for that to wrap up and see what kind of recommendations come out of that before we start looking at the zoning.
There's the table of allowable uses.
I can pull that up.
How many parcels are open or do you think will be redeveloped in the next, I guess, 20, 23, 20, wait, what's the year? 20, 26 years? 25 years? 14? Wait, 2040 is the horizon year?
I mean, that's 249 of our PDF.
That's always an interesting question,
248.
but I would say there's a lot of disincentive right now for especially commercial property owners to make significant changes. And so that was some of the strategy in looking at how to set up these zone districts, was to create some better maybe incentives to redevelop. But there are properties for sale, and we've had some preliminary applications for some conceptual projects. So, I mean, probably at least a handful will change over time. It's just a matter of what extent. Are they doing smaller additions? Are they only changing out uses? Do we think they'll add residential because that will become easier, or do they want to be truly mixed use? But I mean, Truckee doesn't change that fast. So as much as I'd like to say, yeah, quarter mixed use is going to change significantly, it really won't. I mean, we've got to build in the incentives to make it easier for them to want to change those properties into something that matches the general plan.
I'm still confused on why the PUD is on the public instead of part of the corridor on the map.
My assumption is that is most likely what was in the 2025 general plan and what had been previously designated.
Well,
Rather than commercial?
I would imagine be part of the CMU only because eventually that property, as that whole area gets fixed up, it's going to be smarter for the PUD to be somewhere else off of Jorger Boulevard somewhere and turn that into a commercial setup. So
yeah.
I think it should stay CMU regardless of what it was in 2025.
That was part of the 2040 general plan adoption, so that would take a general plan amendment at this point. Yeah.
The story of my life,
But it's
Dan.
not to say that, if the PUD were to move out and someone else came in and wanted to amend the general plan, amend that site and bring it into CMU, that couldn't happen.
So we do have a land use policy 8B, which talks about public facility relocation, partner with the Truckee Donner PUD and Nevada County on possible suitable relocation sites outside of the Gateway District to further implement the Innovate Gateway strategy. Part of that was because the PUD in particular wasn't ready to talk about modifications yet, but we have heard they're interested in having those conversations. So we worked with them on this language so that they were okay with how this was worded, so it didn't force the change, but open the conversation.
Okay. Because, in my world, that they're going to move eventually. They're not going to stay there. As the rest of the neighborhood increases in commercialness, it's going to go. Just like it was a sewer district that used to be downtown 35 years ago.
And I'm not sure, we're dealing with the existing
but
the existing development issue. Had that been changed underneath the PUD, then they would be corridor mixed, they may not be able to repair their building or add something to it if they didn't end up moving, if we had already changed it to mixed use. So I think it gives them more options.
Okay.
Dave, your allowed uses start on page 247 of our PDF. Page 2-61 of the code. Roman numeral 2-6.
And so just so I'm clear, it's mixed use, but doesn't have to have a residential component. It could be mixed non-residential uses. Okay.
Correct.
And is that I know we're only talking about CMU, but is that also for neighborhood? Okay.
Right.
So when you say that, so you mean like a restaurant and a cigar shop or something?
Exactly.
And so why does DMU not require mixed use while the others do?
Because that wasn't changed in the general plan to require it in DMU. And the downtown area is actually under the downtown Truckee plan, so it's kind of a separate set of rules.
Table 210. Why is nothing allowed in ground floor downtown?
That footnote only applies to DMU. That's an existing
Right.
prohibition on commercial row, ground floor commercial uses.
To activate the streetscape and to, kind of keep that down. That's why
To keep it lively and pedestrian oriented.
So
restaurants.
there's a
and-
museum right now downtown, and you say you can't have it.
So we didn't change anything with DMU. This is all existing. I just moved it over to the new table.
Are you talking about the prohibition for ground floor office that's currently in effect?
It says libraries and museum, P2.
P is permitted.
But 2 says these are prohibited on ground floor space on commercial road.
Yeah, that's an existing
So you have the railroad
prohibition.
museum.
So that's existing. This is what's in the current development code. It's just moved over to the new table.
So how did that make it through then if it's existing?
I think Mitch is suggesting an edit.
Sure.
It predated that
It just doesn't make
rule.
sense to me, like what?
They're non-conforming is what that is. They've been there before 2007, which is when that requirement was put in place.
Non-conforming existing.
All right, but
legal
so
use.
what's the purpose of not having a museum downtown? You guys, everybody's screaming for a post office, which I think is retarded, but you can't have a museum. I don't understand.
I mean, the museum is on the other side of the road, so it's not applicable. Like they can be where they're at right now.
But they're in the DMU, aren't they? The museum's in the DMU.
Yeah, but it's not on commercial.
It's not commercial row.
Commercial. I didn't know.
He said pretty soon the post office is going to be a museum.
It's not commercial row, so
That's pretty
that
funny.
street is not
So it's commercial row specifically? That's how the CAC or whatever they call it, the Community Arts Center? Because that's a community center also says you
That's
can't
not
have-
commercial. I don't believe that's commercial row either.
Yeah, it's only from Bridge Street to Spring Street
on Donner
on the
Pass Road.
north side of Donner Pass Road. That's where the prohibition exists today.
Okay.
So it doesn't impact, the jail and the existing
Yeah, because none of that's
Railroad
on
Society. And I mean, the Railroad Society is interested in going over to the regional park, so they have some synergy with Kid Zone and the library if those come to fruition. So mean, it's an older standard, but you're always welcome to make your recommended changes for those too. We would have, right? Yeah. No, I mean, I'm not saying it would be an easy change. I'm just saying that if you
And I'm not
support the change, you can say that.
I wasn't getting it, but I didn't understand it was just the one street. I thought it was the full downtown area, like the historic section.
Yeah, I mean, it's also really just about hours of operation, that museums don't often have, enough docents or volunteers to, be open as long as a lot of the other businesses on Commercial Row are.
So now, and I'm going to throw something I don't want to say, but real estate offices aren't allowed either. Why isn't that on the list?
It's an office. Offices are prohibited.
Yeah, there's
Different
there's
section.
other tables
Yeah,
here.
it's
There's
further down.
Residential, I believe that's under service. So it becomes
offices
footnote
were up
3 on this table.
I had this argument when they came up with this 15 year, what was that, 15 years ago when they came up with the real estate thing?
2007.
So when do you think this is going to come back to us for us to make decisions and recommendations?
We were hoping September, but we might have another item on that night, so it might be October.
So you changed the rail transport corridor. So all those rules now, instead of it used to be the downtown railroad transport. Now it's the whole thing. So Glenshire, Donner Lake.
There's that whole corridor that's identified in the general plan now.
That goes from one edge of town to the
And
other.
interestingly, it comes to the boundaries of the downtown Truckee plan, and then the downtown Truckee plan, I think we realized we needed to clean that section up because it doesn't match. So that's another cleanup we're going to need to do. But yeah, they expanded it in the general plan to include the whole corridor.
1808020. Where is that?
Purposes of residential zoning
It was something with an acreage thing. I got to see it.
So these were the descriptions, and we just updated them to reflect the densities that are identified in the general plan.
So did something change to have animals from 5 acres to 1 acres? That's what my notes say.
Oh, and rural residential?
Yeah, and that's there aren't
Minimum of 5 acres.
So we previously described it as generally being 5 acres or more, but we changed that to 1 acre or larger because we thought that more accurately reflected what we actually see in terms of parcels that can have horses and other livestock.
But horses used to be 1.5. This would make it 1.
Well, this is just kind of reflecting that the average isn't 5 acres for those parcels. Some of them are
Say
smaller.
average there. The density of development for this zoning district generally
includes
properties of 1 acre or all right, got it. Railroad. There was a typo. Something still had DSP instead of DTP. Table 2.1 zoning district. It was probably further. Probably more at the beginning. 1806. In the CG right there. Whoop. CG, you still have DSP. It should be T.
Yeah, got it.
Check you out.
I was acting like Coral. Did it come across?
Okay, I'll fix that.
And then downtown manufacturing industrial should also have DTP.
So I think that in the downtown Truckee plan, if I remember right, there might not actually be any DM.
There's a DSP up there. Is that the one you were just talking about?
On the CG?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the only DM might actually be outside the boundary of the downtown Truckee plan now, if I'm remembering right. That's why that's shown that way.
So drive-throughs are prohibited. Okay.
Can we go back to
Or
eight?
they will be. That's, Mountain Brew came in before that.
Right. Mountain Brew was deemed complete, deemed complete prior to the adoption of the plan.
Can we go back to 1808020? C. So you were changing appropriate densities range from 4, you changed it to 6. How come?
Because that's what's in the general plan.
A lot of these cleanup items are just to reflect.
Why is that in there? Because usually you need 4 units creates a subdivision, so shouldn't 4 be the number? That's why I thought that was weird.
No, 6 is just the base, the low level of density that's required now in the general plan.
I heard that, but
Yeah.
that doesn't make it right, just because it says it in the plan. Right? Subdivisions start at 4, so shouldn't it be 4?
Subdivisions can be 2 or more. That's just the density that's assigned to the RM district. It's not tied to a subdivision quantity, it's tied to how many units per acre.
I guess I'm just going for consistency. I would assume that's why it was 4 in the first place.
I don't think so. I think that was just the baseline density that was assigned back in 2025 or 1996.
Uh, 1808050. Number 4 was removed. How come?
Oh, this was an interesting section that we don't think we've actually used that basically would allow the density to be exceeded. But because the general plan looked at all of these densities and assigned specific ones and ranges to the parcels, this would actually allow an increase beyond what was analyzed in the EIR for the general plan. So we thought that should be removed.
But the general plan doesn't specifically say that?
No, but it established specific densities for development.
And your code can't allow something that's inconsistent with the general plan.
So why are we looking at this if this is all stuff that's, if every answer is going to be that's what the general plan says, why am I here?
That's why they're cleanup amendments. We were kind of discussing the new CMU zone districts and the new NMU zone districts. These are brand new zone districts. So we're trying to find, we're trying to strike that, like what the intent of the general plan was. And we wanted to see, if you had feedback or questions on why we made those decisions.
Well, I do, but I keep getting the same answer.
Well, these are the cleanup items. So we need to be consistent with the general plan. So we need to we might as well take care of all of this kind of business at the same time.
Yeah, versus the development standards for the different zone districts, asking us questions about.
And I saw the floor ratio went up, that's good, which I was kind of
So
surprised that.
1814 is what you really want us to focus on tonight?
Yeah, those are the new zone districts that we created. So
Are there things in here that,
Well,
I read it, but I don't know what I should really be paying attention to?
18.12, table 2-7, the hospital was removed, why?
that was because it was allowed under that zoning outside of the campus area. Other types of hospital facilities are allowed, like clinics and things, but we thought if there's going to be an additional hospital facility, it should be within the hospital campus, because that's consistent with the general plan as well.
I have a question about the NMU and CMU residential stuff. So I can't tell if you're building a residential component to any of these in either of those districts, does it have to be a rental or can it be ownership based too? Okay, I just wasn't sure.
Yeah, we can go to the residential table and make sure that's clear. So, yeah, I can see why that would be confusing because we have these different sort of definitions, if it's individual ownership or not. That would be for standalone. So what's allowed in this zone now would be the things that are either required under state law for housing.
Why would we want to allow SROs? I'm just curious. Like, they're not the best, highest quality housing option for folks.
Yeah, so that's the kind of thing that would be helpful to get feedback on. I mean, they're allowed in the DMU, so when we were looking at what would be appropriate in these different zones, we had to just make some decisions about what seemed to make sense, but that's the kind of stuff that would be helpful to get feedback on.
And functionally, we do have SROs in Truckee. We don't have many, but we have what was previously the Red Light Youth Hostel, which is currently being used functionally as an SRO. And then Casa Baeza's units on the second floor function as SROs also.
Do we
want
don't necessarily-
more?
Yeah.
Or would we just want to make them non-conforming uses?
Well, and one thing, we have them as use permits. So that's, so maybe it's more of a question, like, use permits look at compatibility. So maybe there is a reason in a development that someone would come with a proposal and you'd say, oh, that might make sense. Like maybe Casa Baeza made sense.
I mean, we've had developers come in and look at building entire projects of SROs because they see them as a viable option, particularly for the ski industry housing. Whether that's appropriate for Truckee or not hasn't been discussed publicly, I don't think. But they are more affordable type of housing because then you're renting a room and you have shared facilities.
I've seen some modern projects that are actually kind of intriguing in this category. They're almost a combination of an SRO and a group home kind
Like
of
dormitory structure almost.
kind of concept. Yeah, it provides you minimal private space at a very low cost. So I don't know, maybe there is room for that. Yeah, I mean, if you're thinking of a transient hotel in downtown Sacramento, it's a little bit different beastie, though. Yeah.
So I guess one question would be, do you think that's appropriate in all of these zone districts, or do you think it's appropriate downtown, but maybe not, in some of these other areas? Those could be feedback items.
Maybe I think it might even be more appropriate in the corridor mixed use than in the downtown one, just because the corridor offers more services that could be within walking distance. Presumably someone staying in an SRO would be lower income, perhaps not, might not have a car. The corridor mixed use, the gateway area is kind of, as I understood from the general plan process, envisioned as kind of a walkable place with doctors and stores and things like that, not tourist oriented. Well, supportive housing, maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, there's some of these items, like transitional housing, supportive housing. There is some state law around where we have to allow those types of uses. So we didn't touch those where they are currently. We'll be looking at that probably with the next round when we have time to do some more research.
I mean, I like having either, I understand with the state law stuff that we can't, it is what it is. But I like for some of these other options that it is a use permit required, so it gives us a little bit of ability to look at a project and decide if and where it makes sense. So I like having those kind of built into this. What is caretaker housing?
The one project that I worked on was Fastlane. Their employee housing was approved as a caretaker unit because multifamily wasn't allowed in that zone and they wanted an employee to live on site.
Yeah, I mean, overall, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, I think having like a variety and diversity of housing options and all these things makes this a lot stronger, and hopefully allows flexibility when a developer comes in and wants to actually build something to include a residential component, seeing as they don't have to. This hopefully might make it worth their while to do so, because I love the idea of having mixed-use developments in particular areas that are close to transit. Well, our transit up here, but walkable resources and amenities, I think that's great and definitely is fulfilling that vision of the general plan. So happy to see this. In terms of actually, do you guys have any other comments on the residential side or?
Only with regard to employee housing.
Go for it.
Well, I just wondered why employee housing was not permitted in CMU and NMU.
So I think this item in the table is based on the state requirements for employee housing, which are in single-family residential. They have a certain number of bedrooms that can be rented out to employees. And since single family is not allowed in these other two zones, we didn't include it.
Do we need another line to permit it? Some kind of employee housing there? Does it just not make sense?
So we added workforce housing as a use down at the bottom here. That wasn't in the table before. And then we did add some language in the special purpose zoning district that was specific to housing for school district employees. And then there were a couple other properties in town, like the public service center, that the general plan specifically wanted to allow it kind of employee and student housing, I think they called it.
I remember seeing something.
Yeah, but that's a different, and then we had to create a definition for that because it didn't exist.
Yeah, are there going to be definitions for all of these somewhere in the development code?
Yeah, all the existing uses are already defined, and then there were a couple definitions that we recommended updating as part of this round of updates in the cleanups.
Okay.
If we add any new uses, then yeah, we'll have to define those as well.
I will say, though, that as we've been going through this process internally as staff, there are other definitions and uses that we think are outdated. And so, although we didn't put them in this round of cleanups, they're on a subsequent sort of list of cleanups to do, where we just want to make sure we're sort of using current language and our definition matches what's actually happening. So, I mean, these same definitions and have been in here since the town incorporated a lot of them. So we figured it was a good time to just try and refresh them all too, to make sure that they're current. We're just doing it in sections because we're doing it more topic based. So it's not, we're not going through each chapter and going, you know, all the way through each chapter to try and address everything, because that would be impossible. And you guys would not want to sit in these meetings.
Further next to the next table, if we're only if we're ready to move on. I had a question about table 211, site disturbance.
Oh, was this in your
was in my
comments?
email?
Yeah, I think when I put that in there, I think I originally said no maximum, and then I changed it to be consistent with how we set it up here. But I can see what you're saying, that maybe that should be
above. Those are just there's no required setback.
Yeah,
but you site disturbance. It just probably no maximum. Or
yeah,
no.
I think you're right.
So in the NMU versus the CMU, slight difference in floor area devoted to commercial uses. Is there a specific reason that's different than in the CMU?
So that's where we thought that, you know, our NMU is mostly where our neighborhood commercial used to exist. And that really was like the commercial nodes, like kind of the idea is that with the existing residential neighborhood and that commercial node, you kind of have mixed use. We want to make sure that commercial uses and services and neighborhood services remain. So we skewed towards more commercial than residential. And then in corridor mixed use, we figured that there's more commercial already existing. It's kind of a commercial center. So we're looking to get some more residential put in to make it more of that kind of mixed use. And so we skewed that way. But, you know, once again, this is why it took a while, because we sat around at a table and like, what does make sense? How does that work? Like, you know, what is the intent? We had this general plan land use designation, but what's the vision? So that's where we went with it. So, but if you have feedback on that, or if you like it or dislike it, that's what we like to hear.
No, I see now, understand now. more comments may percolate up with additional time, steeping time.
And I think that's what we were hoping for with this kind of method. I know we had hoped to, when we did these, to give them to you guys a week earlier than our usual. So this gives you much more time.
See several yawns.
Yeah, and don't feel obligated. Like
It's been a long night.
Yeah, if you want to take it home and think about it, that's totally fine. We just we're here for questions, and if you just want more time, that's great too.
Yeah, or if you have thoughts afterwards and you want to email them to Chantal and me, we can, we can incorporate.
One question, one quick, I
Yeah.
think, well, and maybe this is something to consider. Are there any things you really would have liked to put in here that for some reason you didn't, or, what would be kind of a thing you'd love to see put in here?
We're currently developing what we have previously called the Town of Truckee Density Bonus Program. What that's really going to look like are incentives that hopefully encourage developers to use our density bonus program rather than the state's density bonus program. I think you heard tonight a lot of heartburn over what the state is doing. So we're developing something to try to be an alternative to that. And we anticipate it being incentive-based, so there will likely be things in that program that we're not offering here as a way to incentivize people participating in that program.
Presumably a density bonus program that still meets state law.
Of course, and one that focuses more on our local workforce than what we're seeing coming out of the state, which actually results in less affordability overall.
Great, that sounds like a very good idea. I don't have any.
Further.
So I think we're going to percolate on this. What was the word?
And maybe
Marinate.
Illuminate, marinate,
Well, some
percolate.
of us may marinate on it, some of us may percolate on it.
It looks like we're not on TV anymore either.
Oh, no.
Oh, this again. This always seems to pop up during our meetings. Do you think it's effective? Like, so if we have kind of more discussion topic, new stuff, bring it forward. But if it's more just, hey, we're trying to implement consistency, would you rather have us just bring that forward for a recommendation versus having discussion about those items? I think we're trying to figure out how to structure our future agendas of development code without overwhelming you.
The cleanup stuff is usually just, it's just cleanup. If it's just got to be in there because it's in the general plan, then I don't know that we could just read that. And if there's something that really sticks out in the edits, then.
So maybe we can just be clear in our staff reports too. These were the ones that are cleanups that are, must-dos for general plan consistency. And then these are the discussion-based topics, and so we can separate them out.
Yeah,
that's
that would be
how it was
helpful.
structured in
That
the
would be
staff
helpful.
report. And I think it is helpful to give it to you ahead of time to look at, because that was a pretty robust list, I will say, 29 different cleanup topics. But yeah, that's why we didn't talk through all of them in the presentation, because we didn't think there needed to be as much discussion on that.
I like how it was presented in the staff report, so I have the list. I can just pull those pages and then just look at each one, so then I knew why. That's helpful.
But I did appreciate the presentation and conversation around the stuff where you want feedback on that's not just general plan cleanup. And I did like getting it ahead of time, but then also having you explain it to us and the intent behind it, I think was really helpful. And I think it'll make me think about it a little bit differently when I go home. So I did appreciate that format tonight too.
I'd agree with that.
Okay, great. That's good to know. Timing for comments, maybe in the next few weeks, like maybe next 3 weeks, if we're shooting for October.
What would your ideal timeframe look like if we're likely on an October agenda for this?
Well, I'm not going to be here in September, so.
Ooh, me neither.
Oh.
We need 3
Well, actually, I could still look at emails and stuff, so I would just say the sooner the better, I guess.
Do
Yeah, I
do
mean, I
we
can
have a
still make
quorum for
comments.
September?
I'm not going to be here in September.
I'm not here.
I think it's the 7th.
I want to say the 17th.
Yeah.
15th of, oh no, that's not.
17th.
Sorry.
I'll be here.
Okay.
Dan?
Raymond? Yeah.
17th.
We potentially have a housing project that we'll need a quorum on for that night.
Yeah.
Okay. So I heard 3 yeses. Okay.
Yes.
For something that you need comment on via email, that I can do
Yeah, me too.
regarding that thing. Yeah.
Wait, what was the question though, besides the September?
Time
Oh, I
frame
was
for
just-
comments?
Well, I was just
Oh,
trying to figure
right.
out when we would want comment, if you had additional thoughts that you wanted us to try to incorporate.
September.
And probably, yeah, maybe try to get it to us in the next month or so. And then that'll give us time to digest it and figure out how to make any changes we
And
need to make.
we can send you a reminder in case it slips off your calendar.
Can you send it to my personal email? I'm gonna have to meet with IT. New phone. Authenticator gone.
Okay, what's next?
That's it.
We got staff reports. Commissioner.
Staff reports?
Oh, just sort of what I said, we potentially have a housing project on for your September agenda, and if that's the case, that'll be the entire agenda for the evening. If that's not ready, we have some backup items that will probably fill the calendar as well.
Okay. Commission reports, anybody? Are we adjourned?
Motion to adjourn.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.